deer. But with 10 deer killed, that means that that number has now changed to 458 to 926 deer in Carlisle. And if we look at the range of the deer, that how this changes the deer density, the 30 deer per square mile, the low end, drops to 29.35 per square mile, and the high end of 60 deer per square mile drops to 59.36. And this is a total change in population from about 1% to 2%, depending on which numbers that you use. Now let me say we doubled the number of deer killed. So that just changes the 29.35 number down to 28.7. It changes the 60 deer per square mile down to 58.7. It's not a huge change, and I think that was recognized 2 weeks ago that supposedly we were just starting out, and that this number, I guess, the metric that's being used is how many deer are going to be killed and done safely and whatnot. But I started looking at the 10 deer, and I was looking at the sex versus not the sex of the deer, the male, the female, everything, where it was located, and then I realized I was overcomplicating things. So I said to myself, rather than take the range, let me take the middle ground. And so what I did, instead of using the new number of 458 from this 10 deer kill and the high number of 926, let me use a number like right in the middle, 692. Then I only have to do one hand back of the envelope calculation. So what I'm going to do is leave all the state conditions there, except for whether the deer are male and female, and if or not they can breed. I don't have, with this calculation, I didn't have access to how many deer are typically killed during a winter kill, how many are taken down by predator animals, how many come in from other towns, things like that. So I just left that alone. So this is a cheater, but I think it's very indicative, because I think whether the deer is male or female and whether or not they're allowed to breed is probably the most important thing that will determine the number of deer. So the goal is how are this 10 deer going to affect the deer density in Carlisle? And I have to read some of my scribbles. So I look at the deer, and I don't know what the ratio of male and female deer is in Carlisle. I mean, I don't think anybody does, but let's just say it's 1 to 1. So now they're allowed to breed, okay? So next year, and there's 1 to 1, that means there will be 346 male deer and 346 female deer. So I'm looking at, now that the hunt is over, how many deer can we expect next year based on the breeding? So the math is pretty basic. You're going to have the 346 original males, because no more hunting is being done, and everything else is equilibrated except for the breeding. 346 females to start, but yet we have to add to that number the number of what do you call baby deer? Fawns that come out of this. And the factor is 1.4 times 346, which is what the females have, which means there's going to be 484 additional deer based on breeding. So the total of deer next year has risen from 692 to 1,176. Okay, so that's out of 1 to 1. That's an increase of 484 deer. If the ratio is 1 male to 2 females, which is more likely because conventional hunting has brought us to this point, because the male deer are the ones that have been, the trophy animals have been the ones that have typically been hunted. And so right now, for the first go around, I'm going to make it so that the females are twice as many as the males. And males can easily impregnate 20 females in a season. So this is very possible. So if I add the total number up, the number changes from 1176 from the 1 to 1 ratio up to 1,337 deer. Okay, this is a delta of 645 deer. All other things being equal, just the fact that the deer are allowed to breed and that the ratio is now 2 females to 1 male. If I now change the ratio inversely to that and make it 2 males to 1 female, the total number of deer still goes above 692. It is now 1,015 deer, okay? So if I were to look at what has happened at a 1-to-1 ratio, let me do this way. Let's make it the ratio 2 males to 1 female, and then 1-to-1, and then 1 male to 2 females, and see what the increase in deer is. 2 males to 1 female, 1,015. 1 male to 1 female, 1,176. 1 male to 2 females, 1,337 deer. The deer delta in the same spread goes from 323 additional deer to 484 additional deer to 645 additional deer. The 10 deer that were killed in the deer hunt is minimal, has minimal to no influence on the total number of deer that Carlisle will have. Now, we can't put everything into a steady state condition like I did, but with the breeding and the number of female deer, the dominant factor, what this does is it shows that the hunt is not going to give us not going to give people who want the hunt to occur what they want. It's not going to drop the deer population. You can see from the chart that it is not a lack of hunting or the lack of deer killed that has caused the concerns that we have today. That being
so it's been 10 minutes.
Okay, just one. I'm sorry. Did I was talking 10 minutes?
Yeah.
I apologize. I have a quick conclusion, but if you don't want, that's fine.
You can do a quick.
Okay. Quick conclusion. I should have looked at a watch. The deer hunt is conclusion 1 is the deer hunt has an extremely low likelihood of working, and I can work on massaging the numbers, but this is the best I could do. And too many resources, people and money have been spent on a deer hunt that won't work. The comments I want to make is archery hunters that want to hunt during the fall season will not lose that ability to hunt. Great meadows will still be open. And also that the Carlisle citizens, their town lands will come back to them in the autumn so that they can hike and walk and enjoy the outdoors without any concerns whatsoever. And that's it.
Is there anybody else here for public input?
Okay.
No. So I do want to respond to the first one, if everybody thinks that's appropriate. I think at the end of the last, I know that at the end of the last meeting, the next step was for the Deer Committee to have an open public meeting where they would invite people in to gather feedback and make a recommendation based upon that feedback to the Board of Selectmen as to whether or not putting deer hunting on the, I believe a town meeting agenda was appropriate, right? And so, I mean, it seems to me like we have that forum, and there is yet another forum after that, which would be town meeting. So I think that we have everything kind of in place to be able to gather the appropriate feedback. It seems a little bit counterintuitive to me that we would have this group of people who have been working on the project all along and then create a whole new group of people that are dealing with something entirely different. We will make sure that it's well advertised when this meeting is happening, and then they can come back to the Board of Selectmen with their recommendation as we charge to them. Does anybody disagree with that?
And I would like to point out that when we embarked on this whole thing, the Deer Committee and the Board of Selectmen held a joint open forum. There was, in fact, I believe there were 2 that we held.
Yes, there were.
So people who had already had ample opportunity before we even embarked on the whole thing to weigh in, and I think that's an appropriate way to finish. We want to do it as a joint again, so that we actually hear.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think what I think makes sense is they do it first, and then of course, when they present, it will be an open
okay.
Board of Selectmen
Fine.
meeting. Okay, anybody? Okay, so that's a response. All right. Thank you all for.
I have one question. May I ask a question of the last presenter, just for
Sure.
clarification?
Sure.
Jeannie, are those numbers just just town land, they're not additive to the 20 to 40 deer that are killed normally?
That's just the town land.
Just the town
Just the
lands.
town land.
So we've gone from 20 to 40 to 30 to 50, is that?
Yeah, but it's still gonna make a very small difference, because you're looking at, I did the numbers for 40, which is, normally the average is 30, and then it's an additional 10.
Mhm.
So, but I don't have them here, but these are not huge numbers, okay, so.
Right.
I mean, I can do for a whole spread if you wanted to, but this
Well,
is
just
the
just
back end.
clarification.
May I just ask one question? Is the deer stuff over with now, or, meaning, can I go?
Yeah, we're not gonna be, this was just, it is, the deer hunting is not on the agenda.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so, assessors. If you want to just come right on up, and I think it's this is a joint meeting, so do you have a quorum?
We do not have a quorum tonight.
Okay.
And so we will be rescheduling the discussion that we were supposed to have on the tax classification.
Uh-huh.
And that's been rescheduled for till Tuesday, December 11th.
Okay, and do they need a quorum in order to appoint?
They do not. The way that it works is that it's the members of both boards meeting jointly, but you don't need really a quorum by the board. Between the 5 selectmen and the 2 members now of the Board of Assessors, that's 7. So you need 4 votes to appoint a new member to the Board of Assessors. So
But not a quorum of both?
right. So those votes could come solely from this board.
And we have 2 here now. Why don't you,
Right. Well,
Well, you have one.
one and one perspective.
One member to be.
maybe soon to be 2.
Yeah.
Okay, so why don't you come on up and sit down, and then we can, you both can come up and.
That's fine. Gentlemen, this is Teresa. I'd like to introduce her, and for those of you who don't know me, I'm Ken Mostello. I'm the chair of the Board of Assessors.
Okay. Hello, Teresa. Hi. Thank you for volunteering to serve on this, on the Board of Assessors and be a volunteer in town.
Sure.
Does anybody have any questions? We have,
How do you
Got
pronounce
a
your
letter
last
from
name?
her.
Seems to have.
I'm sorry, one more time?
Kvetkauskas.
Vetkowskis.
Didn't know that. Murderer.
Okay.
I do enough of that.
Most people just call me Therese.
Yeah, but it's, for the purpose of this meeting, we'll
Right.
have to say the whole thing.
Oh.
Right. And so you've lived here since 1994?
Yes. Yes.
Have you been on any other boards?
I was head of the Board of Trustees when we built the library and opened in 2000.
Yep.
That was my next, well, that was one of my first questions to Ken is, are you planning on building anything? That was, when I joined that board and then we built the library and so. But anyway.
They won't build it, but you'll tax it.
That's right. Yes. Okay.
Any other questions? Great, well, thank you very much for volunteering. Is there, somebody want to make a
I
motion?
move that the Board of Selectmen and the remaining members of the Carlisle Board of Assessors vote pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 41, Section 11, to appoint Teresa Paula Kvetkauskas of 212 Judy Farm Road to fill the vacancy on the Board of Assessors through the May 2019 annual town election.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Now, do we need him in order to extend the, public hearing?
It's been advertised as the board's hearing, so you can move on, on your own motion to.
Without, yeah.
You don't need,
Okay, thank you.
they don't need to remain.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Number 4.
And then there were 2.
And since the hearing was advertised for 7:30, we tried to stick another little piece of business in.
Right.
In
So we have the-
between, there's a appointment of an associate member to the Trails Committee. I noticed Steve
Come on up.
Tobin's here tonight. The appointment will be Jonathan DeCote, but
Is that a DeCoke?
DeCock.
DeCock, okay.
So I'm Steve Tobin, Chairman of the Trails Committee.
Thank
Hi, I know most of you folks. So Jonathan's been coming to our meetings for the last year, which is above the call of duty because we have them Friday nights. And he's been out with us on the trails every time we've done a project for the last year. So we thought we'd like to recognize him for that. We already have our full complement of 7 members on the committee. So we thought if we could have an associate member, that would be worthwhile.
Can they have associate members?
Yeah, council confirms that they can.
Okay.
They have
And do you
non-voting
know his
members.
address?
Right.
It's on.
130 Oak Knoll.
There you go. Jen's on top of things.
Okay. I was just wondering if he knew it, that's all.
Oh.
It's on Oak Knoll, but I don't know the street address.
130 Oak Knoll.
Thanks. I can walk to his house.
In case you want to drive over and tell him. He's been appointed, yeah.
Okay, anybody have any questions? Okay.
I move that the Board of Selectmen vote to appoint Jonathan DeCock of 130 Oak Knoll Road as an associate member of the Carlisle Trails Committee.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous.
Thank you very much. I'm sure Jonathan will be thrilled.
He's got a tractor.
Yeah. Thank you.
Actually, I forgot to bring the memo that I was going to bring.
Oh, right. You
The
have
Facilities Committee would also like to have an associate member. Can you just talk about that briefly now, or do you want to?
Let's, okay, can we just throw that in? Sure.
Yeah, we got time.
The superintendent of schools suggested that their newly appointed superintendent, manager of facilities, school facilities, become an associate member of the municipal facilities committee. That would be mutually beneficial for both entities to have this liaison
Okay,
attend all meetings.
Makes sense.
okay, so there's a school committee member and then a facilities employee.
Yes,
Okay, how does that work if an employee is on a committee?
would be an
an
associate or
associate
an alternate member, wouldn't be a full member.
Okay.
Would
Non-voting.
be a non-voting
Probably
member.
non-voting, yeah.
Yeah.
But we have employees on
Yeah,
Yeah.
committees.
yeah, you're right, okay.
So the school has actually hired somebody
Yes.
to replace David?
Yes.
Oh, good.
Okay. Do you want to put that on the next agenda, or do you know their name and title and
I'll put
everything?
it on the next agenda.
Okay,
Okay.
all righty. Ken, you want to just jump ahead to your report?
Sure. And the first, I think the first item in my report was to notify you that the Community Center RFQ evaluation team has met and recommends awarding the feasibility study contract to Abacus Architects. And as procurement officer, I can award that contract to them, but they wanted the board to be aware that this is being funded by the Chinar grant, the feasibility study for a community center, and that work will get underway shortly. But they wanted to.
Do they have any idea when it will be completed?
I think it would be early next year. I think they want to have something that they can.
I was gonna
So
say,
not-
likely before town meeting.
Yeah,
so they can ask
probably
for
in
money.
time.
Not for town meeting, though, then if it's early.
Right. Yeah, probably not, but
Okay.
as soon as possible.
Because did we establish deadlines yet for different things?
For, I mean, for warrant articles and
Yeah.
things, I think late January, we've got a deadline for submission of warrant articles. Yeah,
And that's a well-known,
Second- the
well-published
second-
deadline?
yeah, the second board meeting. We can send a reminder out to people that it's part of the town meeting timeline, but it's the second board meeting in January is usually when you kind of, people have to signal their intentions by that point, or it's not, it's gonna be too
People need to be
late.
done by that point.
Right.
I mean, because what
Yeah,
happened
well, that's
last
exactly
year was
it,
people
right.
would signal their intentions but have no
Plan.
number or plan or
Just-
anything.
Yeah,
and it was
you
kind
gotta
of-
have more than a placeholder, more than just a notion. You gotta have a
Right,
something
So
that's been
maybe-
thought out.
I know that we've done this once already. Could we just go through that timeline again next meeting?
Sure.
I just want to kind of make sure that we've set it in stone.
Okay, will do. The second item is that the Personnel Board has some time on the December 6th agenda to talk about process with the Board of Selectmen. If members of this board don't mind attending that meeting, rather than having the Personnel Board come here.
Yeah, so
that's
Tim and I
next
talked about
Thursday.
this in our one-on-one last week. You know, I really want us to get together with them. They, you know, I think they have the hardest time with a quorum, so I thought it would be good for us to try to meet during their regularly scheduled time and,
That's when,
It's a Thursday,
Yeah.
That's when the
Sixth.
teacher
yes, that's the night of the,
mediation
and that's why Tim thinks it would be somewhere around 8 o'clock.
Yeah,
Oh,
because
okay.
they've already
All
got,
right.
yeah, some business at 7, between 7 and 8, so it could be,
All right.
Yeah,
Could be
so
later.
that gives us plenty of
It's
time.
supposed to go from 4 to 8, yeah. Yeah, Andy said give it 4 hours.
Okay. Yeah, so we'll have to cut it. 'Cause, so, and again, the idea between this, of this meeting, as I said last time, is just make sure that, you know, we know what they do
Yeah.
and they know what we do, and kind of set the guidelines for as we're going into this next budget year as to who goes first in getting approvals for
Yeah.
new positions.
okay, good. And then item number 3, we're putting together that solar negotiation working group. And we've asked the Facilities Committee, the School Committee, and the Finance Committee to name members. You'll recall that there's a Board of Selectmen member also, so if anyone here wants to volunteer or suggest to someone else that they'd like to see on that committee, that would be helpful.
Was Eric
Working group.
Zimmerman invited to join, do you know?
Yes, yeah, we've got, some interest
So it's,
from other, and the school committee's gonna get back to us on
so
who
it's
they would.
Eric, speak up, sorry.
Bob's all-
Uh-huh.
Zog?
yeah, Bob's on.
I would volunteer for that,
You would, Alan?
yeah, because I'm
Plus
liaison to the Energy Committee
Well,
anyway.
no, because there were 3 of you presenting, and 2 of them
Jonathan.
were on the committee.
Jonathan
That's fine. Yeah, Bob Clark's the other guy.
DeCock.
Okay.
Yeah. So, sounds like Alan's raising his hand, unless somebody wants to wrestle it from him.
Thank you,
All right,
Alan.
get right on that, yeah.
Thank you.
It's important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
No, it is. Yeah.
Wait, right,
No, I meant, let me get right on
It'll be
wrestling
a-
him for this spot. Yeah.
right. And there's gonna be a meeting with the school committee on December 12th, and they've asked Bill and others to be present for that, to talk about.
The old committee.
Yeah, the old, yeah.
The old work.
Because I don't think we'll have the new one together quite
The
by then,
former.
but-
Not
Yeah.
old, former.
Okay. And then we've got the upcoming schedule, and we'll add to the December 11th meeting, the tax hearing that you just, we haven't gotten to that yet. That'll be on there, because that'll be postponed to that
At
night.
what time will it be on there?
I'd
Let's
recommend 7:30.
Let's make it 7:30 again.
When the board does vote to do that, I guess you could open that hearing now. Also, the master, there'll be a master plan update, or the chair of the planning board has asked for some agenda time for that, so that'll
Okay.
be a fairly full agenda. The finance committee will be coming in for the second coordination meeting, just as the budget process is kicking off.
Oh, and that makes it a perfect time for us to also go through the agenda,
Yeah.
the schedule.
That's right, that's right.
Yeah, we knew that.
Right. And then, you'll note that the, what would be our second meeting in December is scheduled for the 25th, so I'm sure that's a non-starter. Yeah. So I don't know if the board wants to schedule
you're gonna be at
another
work.
meeting in December, or
I gotta work like,
you'll definitely meet on the 11th, and then I suppose you could meet the following week, or wait until after the new year. Meet that week.
Don't- I guess we'll see if anything pressing comes up
Right.
between
There
now
may
and the
not
next
be,
meeting.
right.
I think typically we only have one meeting in December.
Yeah, I believe.
That's usually what happens.
So one thing that I noticed that it was on here and then now it's not, but the new stop sign on
East Street.
East Street.
Oh, that's right.
So, you know, we had asked for a report back in about 6 months on it. It has been about 6 months. I don't, personally, I mean, all I'm really interested in is hearing from Chief Fisher. Has he gotten any complaints? Is it going well? You know, do they notice that it's really working? That can be a written, you know, single
report.
page.
Yeah.
You know, he
Okay.
doesn't have to come here and provide it, but we'll just put it on for 5 minutes on the agenda, or 10 minutes on the agenda, just in case somebody does want to come and complain.
Okay.
Or
that's a good idea.
speak up in strong favor of it. But, you know, I mean, we did say that we would evaluate it in 6 months. And so, again, he doesn't
Put
need to
that on
come,
it.
just
You can just
send
submit
us his
some
thoughts
written-
on it and if he's
written
heard from
comments.
anybody.
Okay,
And we'll have it on the agenda and people can speak up.
all right, will do.
Yeah, maybe, there were a couple of people at that meeting, right? Like Steve Hinton commented.
Well, he sent a written comment. He wasn't
okay.
able to attend.
Yeah, maybe we just reach out to the folks that we know.
Yeah, I think he was the only one that was.
Was he? Okay.
Against,
Yeah.
everybody else was in favor.
It was
Oh, all right.
opposed, yeah,
Okay.
to
Yeah.
putting it
Yeah.
up, so.
There wasn't
might-
anybody there that night, I don't believe, who was against
All
it.
right, yeah, I showed up late.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
But at least you showed up.
that's true, that's true.
Okay, so I'm going to, thank you.
All right,
So we're gonna zip back, and I am going to open the public hearing for the fiscal year 2019 tax classification hearing. And then I am going to continue the hearing to December 11th at 7:30 PM. Unless somebody here would like to talk about it. Thank you. Seeing nobody here to talk about it, I am going to continue the hearing until 7:30 PM on December 11th.
the board should vote
I was
that.
gonna say, yeah, we have
Okay,
to vote
is-
to,
Okay.
yeah.
Continue it
I
to.
remember
a
that from
date-
comms.
Date and time certain, yeah, so
Oh, date and times.
somebody
Okay, I
should
move
just move that.
that we continue the hearing to December 11th at 7:30.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor?
All right.
Aye.
It's unanimous.
Eyes glazed.
Okay,
It's like maybe.
So
good
now-
time to do minutes, or?
now we're way ahead because we just continued the meeting. And two, we have, you're not here for the complete streets, you're here for Energy Task Force. I'm pretty certain that we can do the Energy Task Force now.
I think we should do it last.
Bill?
It is 8:35. Oh, no, 7:35. Oh, my God. How do we ever?
So when do you come out, Bill? So Bill is here to talk about a proposed change to the Energy Task Force mission statement. You know, I read through it, it makes sense. What I don't know is what it used to be.
It's tough. We tried to research the statement, what it used to be, and it's basically Tim Holt talking with a group with Steve Hinton and some other people involved, and it was mainly to reduce energy consumption in town buildings, basically. But we couldn't find a mission statement. I don't know if you found one, Tim.
Nothing official, I think.
Right.
Yeah, more just a sense of
So what the Energy Committee, or Task Force, did was they came up with some items that would be suggested of you for the new mission statement, because the task force is really involved in a lot more than just municipal buildings. They're involved in green communities now. They're involved in a whole bunch of things. And this list is just suggestions, and it's very ambitious. And the amount of resources that, you know, the members and the volunteers we have on the committee. So that it was just to get you people to start thinking about it, the board start thinking about it and deciding on what the real mission statement should be for the Energy Task Force.
And so as I read through this, just to summarize and make sure that I am understanding it, it's lowering energy use and focus on renewables. It's recommending any changes to bylaws or any new
Amendments,
bylaws
right.
to encourage renewable. Actually, I guess I'm gonna stop at each one of these. On the first one, what's meant by and expanding the use of renewable energy? I totally get lowering energy use, but expanding the use of renewable energy, meaning
The
we
first,
put up windmills, or, I mean,
encouraging, I mean, this was for the word town instead of municipality, so that it meant it expanding our mission from just town municipality stuff to residents too, and because we've been involved in like the Heat Smart program, where we've been encouraging people to use heat pumps instead of oil or natural gas to heat their homes. So that's kind of what that was. It expanded it from just municipal.
that makes sense, okay. And then the bylaws, like what types of bylaws might happen?
This was just so that we could look at, like, for example, what's maybe happening with the school, with the municipal solar, where we may make suggestions to change the bylaws so that we could put municipal solar or canopy in, things like that. So that's where that initially came from.
And then number 3 is education.
Education to not just the town departments, but to residents, everybody, yeah.
And then 4 is the green communities.
Yes.
And then 5 is tracking.
Tracking so that
So
we
we
can.
have data.
We have data, and we can educate the town departments and the residents on how, the energy is being used and what you maybe can do to reduce energy or move it to renewables.
So, I'm thinking about our discussion last week when we were talking about the budget and how we track the fact that we're saving this money. And that spending money to save money when you don't actually save any money seems counterintuitive. Does it make sense to have something in here about that, or is that just?
Well, but then you also have the other imperative of doing better for the environment. So it's not just spending money to save money, it's also spending money to protect the environment. So it's kind of a two-pronged thing. So, I mean, you're getting some value that is kind of maybe a little more ethereal, but it's still value.
For example, didn't the school save money by doing something only to have it not reflected in their budget?
Yeah, well, we put in all the LED lighting.
Correct.
At the town level, we put in all the LED streetlights, which save $4,000, right?
Yep, and
6.
at least that much.
Yeah.
We've done $1,000,
So even if,
savings
so
at the
somehow,
library.
and maybe it's just in number 5 there, but it's, this is data about the use of energy for residents and everything, but I wonder if we could expand it to also to tracking the impact of your activities at a cost level.
Well, okay, and that also brings us then to another part of the discussion, and that is how much support this committee. This is a very ambitious mission. I don't see a bunch of volunteers being able to really do this without.
It is, the members some of the members are getting burned out and moving on, and we're looking for new members and new people, so.
That's
So
where
it needs,
that's where if we could actually track where we're saving the money,
Yeah, that would
We
help
can-
to fund
we can
back.
put that
the-
into
Right.
funding some hours of
Well,
an employee.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
And
Because
I
I
think
think
it
we
would
saved
be
lots of money, but we haven't
appropriate.
actually reduced the budget.
Yeah, I know. But, you know, when we had the energy manager, he brought in a lot of income. More than the salaries, I recall. Plus, they saved money on top of that. And then we lost that person. Now we're looking for a part-time facilities manager. We're having a hard time. I'm thinking about that we should be thinking more out of the box and see what sort of support the town needs in general, and can we kind of roll this up into one, you know, bigger, better job that we can
Yeah.
actually hire somebody for.
And to do that, you need to document what if you are saving, how much of that can be converted into dollars, which you can then repurpose for providing support.
I think we have some of that already.
All the projects that we've done on the green communities, we have dollars attributed to them in the year that they were done on the energy we saved. And you can see the dollars. Just comes to mind, the pump that we put at the library saves the library over $1,000 a year. The solar panels that we put at the school is $2,000 a year savings in electricity, and the town gets $2,000 in SRECs for the next 5 more years per year. And it just goes on, all these LED lights here. So it's all, we all have it in a database that accounts for the dollars that we've saved, you know, in that year, or the BTUs. So we have that data if you want to use it. You know, it's really has saved the town money, and it saves appreciation or increasing of the local budgets. In other words, the school budget didn't have to go up so much because we saved so much money. Same with the town hall budget. You know, and the amount of money we've saved here, and like almost 35 to 40% on the natural gas costs, and just the improvements in the HVAC system and the building management system. And then with the lighting systems, and the town hall budget hasn't gone up, it's, you know, as drastically as it should have if we didn't do this stuff. So it's there, we have it, you know. It depends on if you want to use it or how you want to use that data, you know.
And well, as Kate pointed out, I mean, the grants that were brought in, right? I mean, that's money that the town didn't have to lay out initially to do a
Correct.
lot of these things.
We don't have to build houses.
And all, and all that equipment that the town didn't have to replace.
Right,
Now that we know where it's, you know, lighting and stuff like that. The other thing, though, is as time goes on, it's going to get a little bit more challenging, because all the low-hanging fruit is just about there, done. But every
So
time
it was easy, huh?
it was. But as I walk around the town every year to look at more projects, there's always something that pops up. So,
Bill, the only thing that struck me last time we met that was missing is that, you know, I've heard we have the largest carbon footprint in Carlisle of any town in the Western Hemisphere, and there doesn't seem to be a baseline established here. I think all of this is predicated on our ability to measure against
something.
something.
Well, Green Communities has a baseline, and it's, unfortunately, it was in 2009.
But that was just for town buildings, right?
Town buildings, correct. And I am not up on the carbon footprint stuff. That hasn't been my expertise area or where I've looked at it, so I couldn't really talk to you about that.
No,
But I hear what you're saying
Yeah,
is,
I think we have to, against, what are we
Institute.
measuring? Where are we?
Yeah.
You know, where are we right now?
yeah.
Ought to be a part of this, I think.
So how about if number 5, it says, establish a baseline and track and periodically evaluate community-wide energy use?
That's fine. Yeah,
Can we add that to the beginning of number 5?
sure. It's fine. We just need some resources, help.
Yeah. Establish a baseline to track and periodically,
Or and track.
and track. Well, then you have that and again, track and, establish a
Yeah,
baseline.
track and periodically evaluate,
Okay.
that's fine. All right, so sorry, just kind of dominated the whole discussion.
No, I mean, I think, and number 5 is the key to getting everything else done, I think. And it's very important and not undoable. The toughest part will be getting residential data, but that Eversource probably could provide that. for us.
Eversource always tells me how bad I am.
Well, yeah.
I'm great now that I put my solar panels on.
Is there a way of reporting out to the community on a periodic basis, how we're, the things that we've already done to save
Yeah,
money? I mean, I'm certainly not aware of some of the things you mentioned.
Yeah, we could easily do that. I mean, I shouldn't say easily, but we can do that. I mean, at least the green community stuff, we already report that annually to the state, and we have a list of all the projects we've done and the benefits that we're receiving from them. So, I
I
mean.
don't want to create more work, but I
But-
mean, there's enough here to do, but
Yes.
it
Some of
certainly
this-
would help.
Yeah, I mean, some of this, there are interns in collegiate programs that would be, I think, this would be
Would
a
help.
wonderful job for a couple of those to come in here and help us with that.
So I guess I would say, let's make a motion on the mission statement and maybe ask Bill to talk to the committee about thinking about, not going for everything, but like what types of resources, like how many hours a month might just be helpful as a starting point to help get through some of this.
Or what reasonably could be accomplished over the next 12 months in this regard.
Right. With and without resources.
Or without,
Yeah.
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 So is there a motion?
I would move that the
Question?
board,
Well, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Just to note that we do have a town website, and the Energy Task Force does have a page, and if they populated it with this kind of information and kept it up to date, it would be a good thing for the website and a already existing way to communicate.
Okay, thank you.
I move that the board approve the proposed Carlisle Energy Task Force mission statement of October 4th, 2018, as revised.
Second?
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
All right.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Thank you, Bill, and thank you for mentioning the website, our new website that somebody expertly helped redesign.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Next.
Okay,
Yeah, I will
so,
stay.
moving on to our 7:45, the Concord Municipal Light. Wearing a Concord Municipal Light vest, I assume that's you.
That's me, actually, it's Concord IT.
Oh,
So
okay.
I'm Mark Howell, I'm the CIO for the town of Concord and also the leader of the broadband and fiber optic system that we run out of Concord Municipal Light. So I have couple of hats.
Great, well, welcome.
Just a little bit of background, our Public Safety Communications Working Group, through our consultant, Chick Langone, who's here tonight, had reached out to the Concord Municipal Light Plan a number of months ago for some pricing for fiber services and to see how that would possibly fit in with the project that, we're well underway with here in town. And we've got some members of that working group here tonight. The working group, I think, was favorably disposed, when reviewing the proposal a number of weeks ago, but we wanted to bring Mark in tonight to talk with the board, not only about, how this helps our communications system, but, there are some ancillary benefits that, could be realized down the road as well. So the members who are here tonight, David Freeman's on our working group, Chief Flannery, Chick is behind Deb Belanger, he's our consultant, and Bill, who seems to be on every working group in town. Hitting for
Sent
the
a very
cycle.
clear message a little while ago about burning out. So.
So that's just a thumbnail sketch, and Mark was kind enough to say he'd be here tonight to talk through the proposal. I think everyone should have it in their packet.
Sure.
As a handout. Okay, Mark?
I'd be happy to give you a quick summary of it. Essentially, what the town of Carlisle is proposing to do is a police and fire radio system upgrade. It's almost identical to the type of system that we recently, about 4 years ago, we did something like this in Concord. And then just last year, we augmented it with a secondary transmitter on the high school, or located in the high school, which has an antenna there. So essentially what it is a new kind of way of communicating between multiple radios that give the public safety personnel better access by having radios that automatically sort of, when they transmit, their signal is received in multiple places, and then the system gets together and votes and tries to pick up the best signal so that reaches the dispatching station. And it uses the same communications technology essentially that the internet uses in order to do that. And the highest quality way to communicate with those antennas is a fiber optic network. And so my understanding is that Chick and others have been upgrading the fiber inside of Concord, but the study that you have also has suggested that you should continue to use the Nersnack Hill transmitting tower, which is in Concord, and recommends the installation of another tower at the Middlesex School, which also happens to be in Concord, which is sort of where the thought comes in how to get a fiber optic connection down to Concord to support those. A little bit of background. Traditionally, those connections between antennas and dispatching locations have been made with telephone circuits. The telephone companies simply aren't supporting those copper wires as well as they used to, and it's becoming harder and harder to keep those maintained and operational, and they don't permit this sort of advanced voting functionality that's available in the new system. So, that's kind of the background and what your system actually needs. There's a map, and I kind of came up with a bigger one, but basically at the top, it's on the first page of that. Essentially, the public safety building is here, and what I've done is I've kind of mapped out the two routes that would get you to the edge of the fiber optic system that we're already running for Concord Municipal Light. One is at roughly 1521 Monument Street, or you would know it as the end of River Road, and the other side would be just outside of Middlesex School along Lowell Road. We have it listed here as 12 Lindsay Pond because that happens to be where we have a cabinet. But so as a practical matter, the fiber optic network would need to be extended from where Carlisle currently ends, which is right around 871 Bedford Road or near the farm there, and to Monument Street, or it could be extended basically from this building down Lowell Road. So the solutions we put together involved both of those paths because they serve different purposes. If you were going to lease dark fiber, which is basically the most expensive way to do it, you would want to actually use the Lowell Road route. The reason is you could pick up Middlesex School along the way, meet our network, and then it would minimize the amount of fiber that you would need to lease from Concord to get to a Nersnack Hill. If you use a lit service, which means we basically provide you with a connection that's not exclusive, the least expensive way to connect the two networks is along River Road to Monument Street because it's only about 1.5 miles of construction versus 3 miles of construction. So essentially, it's less expensive to go on the easterly side because the networks happen to be closer together right now. And so you have the details of all of that in the proposal.
So where is 871 Bedford Road?
It's the Andrei Tower. So it's a little ways.
And so the town has fiber up to the Andrei Tower?
No, that's part of what the intent is to do that. This is just the Concord Municipal Light part of it. And then part of the plan is to do fiber within Carlisle as well.
Okay.
But there is fiber from the street to that tower, and we will have facilities on that tower. and that's not town-owned, it's.
Oh, I see. So we have to put the fiber out to that tower anyway.
Yes.
And, I'm sorry, 41 Lowell Street, where's that one? Where's that?
Police
Station. I should know that.
You've been there enough.
I thought the police station, the fire station, and the school were already all.
They are.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to go to the police station, but it could tap into our cable fiber somewhere else, but it's not gonna be that much shorter.
And
It
HQ.
could come here.
HQ is gonna be the police station, but yes, it just needs to be, linked into the system somewhere.
Right, because our fiber all is centralized at the school. Does it make sense to go there instead of?
Well, there'll be a fiber link from the new Banner Davis Tower out to Bedford Road. And then the link that we need to make from 871 Bedford, we'll pick that up to the center of town. And then we also need to do a link from the center of town down to the planned extension at 1022 Westford.
Okay, so this proposal gets us,
It just gets us the Concord
To
part of it,
Concord, yeah.
because
got it.
Concord's in Concord, and everything else that we do internally, we have to do.
And that's because of the NurseNet tower
And Middlesex.
in Middlesex.
Although Middlesex not online yet and is in litigation, but it's
I
part
didn't
of our.
remember Middlesex as being part of the system that was originally proposed.
Yeah, no, it was. It always has been.
So just a couple other questions. One, in proposal one, proposal one is not using the dark fiber, right? This is just
Right.
using, so this is just a VLAN.
Yeah.
And so, but when we installed our fiber here, police and fire insisted that they have their own dedicated pair. This would not be having your own dedicated pair. I think that makes sense. There's a huge amount of capacity on.
It's huge capacity. The amount of data that's actually transmitted over this system is minuscule. I mean, if you could do it over, AOL era modems, actually, it just needs to be super reliable and the latency needs to be very
I was
low.
gonna go home and see if I could dig up any of those CDs.
Yeah, but I mean, basically, it's, it is arguably a waste to dedicate dark fiber to just a radio channel. And because of that, when we do the lit services, it's much better. And like I said, that's what we have done for the town of Concord's police system. We have 5 receivers rather. Now there's actually 3 transmitters on the system. One of them is at the police station, so it doesn't need to use the fiber. But the system is fully capable of providing that. And the advantage of doing the lit service, and by the way, lighting a strand to provide lit services is an option under any particular construction path that you choose to take, is that we could also then be in a position to do other things like provide an internet service to the town, which could probably be less expensive than your current internet provider, as well as collaborate over other things that might involve the education departments or the CCTV, for sure. Yeah, we're already using the exact same system to back all traffic from the town hall in Concord to CCTV studio, for example.
Which is why it would probably make sense to have it go to the school.
Yeah, but once it touches the network, then adding nodes on the network, given how much fiber the plan shows you're building, doesn't really matter. So the most cost-effective thing to do is just figure out where the 2 networks are closest together and build the link that you need to connect them, and then after that, use the existing plant to.
Bill's got a question.
How secure is a lit system?
Very. So you mentioned the VLAN. What we do is on the lit system, we actually create what's called a private VLAN, and that private Motorola specifies that you have to do this for public safety radio networks. So the private VLAN that would be used for the for the Carlisle radio system would be completely separate from all the other private VLANs that are on that system, including including Concord's public safety network.
We're just thinking about hacking.
Yeah, so basically, no system is completely immune to all possible penetrations, but generally speaking, in order to access this network, somebody would have to gain physical access to one of the endpoints. And so as long as the endpoints are secure, the network is very, very difficult to penetrate. Anything else would involve basically breaking the fiber someplace, putting a device in the middle and sniffing. And of course, you'd notice that outage because we'd get alarms as soon as something fell off the network.
Okay, and so proposal one is, I think, probably the best one.
Absolutely.
My opinion.
Yeah.
And so 521 Monument Street, that's the town line, roughly?
Yeah, 1521, that's about as close as, that's the nearest cabinet to the Concord Carlisle town line on the Monument Street side, yes.
Okay. So we need to bring fiber to there.
Right.
Well, I think he's saying that 1521 isn't the town line, it's the closest to where they have now, so they would bring it to the town line, and then we have to get it to the town
Well,
line.
this says that we're bringing it, this proposal says we're bringing it to 1520.
It's a matter of a couple of pole spans, but
Okay.
that's where we happen to have a cabinet. And normally what we want to do is bring this into a cabinet so that we can do patching at that point, so.
Build a second cabinet.
Yeah,
poles down.
right.
Right, okay.
Exactly.
And so do we have any idea, have we gotten any pricing on that fiber install?
On the town-owned fiber? Yes, we have that.
I mean, it's just it is what it is, basically. The reason we ended up, when the original proposal, we were gonna try to connect as much of these things as we could with microwaves. And then it turned out that Carlisle's famous hills and tree height creates problem with the microwave connections, and so that's how we moved to the fiber, and then we looked at various ways of trying to get fiber through Comcast or whatever, and it turned out to be the best way to do it is just to do it ourselves. So I don't know what that number is, and
There's a
we
26,000.
So-
come to discuss that at this point,
Yeah.
because it's not part of what.
We put together, and I would encourage you to seek other quotes from independent contractors, because what we did was we just wanted to put together a ballpark, and so we used the cost if we were using line crews and Concord Municipal Light Plant employees, basically, which is, admittedly one of the more expensive ways to go, because we're not just a fiber construction contracting company. That's not really what we do. But it's there essentially to give you a ballpark of where you might expect it. And so there are other qualified contractors, including some that I know Carlisle has worked with before. And so if we that have operated in the area that would probably be able to give you pricing that's competitive with that.
Or if they come in higher, we know that you can do it for 26.
Potentially, yes.
The other thing to be clear about in terms of the potential future benefits is the fiber that we're proposing to do for the public safety doesn't cover the town completely in order to do, I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, but to accomplish all the potential future things in terms of internet and so on. Because
it would do internet for municipal buildings.
Yes,
It would.
yes.
Yeah.
But not in terms of for the community at large, just to be clear about
Yeah.
that.
Many communities that have done internet have started using their municipal backbone, which is exactly how we started doing it in Concord as well.
Okay. So it's $3,000 to install at 1521, and
Mhm.
then $3,000 a year.
Basically, yeah.
200 megabits.
Right. Yep.
At both Middlesex and.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's
What's the third endpoint?
the third endpoint so the public safety headquarters has to be considered an endpoint, and then it's talking to two other towers, the Nersnack Tower and the Middlesex School Tower.
I think I'm a little confused on this. When we did our communications plan, it was gonna cover 95% of the town. And we're saying now that,
No, it still will. All I was saying is it's not gonna provide cable service to 95% of the
so
town.
this is a net, this is
Internet.
beyond
Yeah.
what we already have.
This, yes, no, the network, the public safety network will still cover 90, I think it's
So this is only,
now 95% of the
this is
time.
only to add a new function for the internet, is, I
Well,
mean,
no, so-
fundamentally, is that what
so-
we're
yeah,
saying?
let me-
It's only
I'll
for the
see if I
public
can
safety.
summarize it. So, for the new public safety tower, there's Nurse Neck Hill and there's Middlesex. And what we were hoping to do was rely on microwave or microwave, right? For communication between those two towers and our tower for that communication to happen. What they're finding is that's not really a great way of connecting it. So they want to switch over to connecting Nurse Neck Hill and to connecting all the towers via fiber network. Part of that fiber network, we don't know the cost yet, but is going to be installing fiber network within our town. But the other thing is I guess we could run fiber down to a Nurse Neck and to Middlesex, or we can lease fiber from Concord, who already has that in place. So this proposal is to connect our fiber network to Concord's fiber network, so they can connect us to our towers at a Nurse Neck and Middlesex. So that's what this $3,000 install and $3,000 a year is. In the future, if we wanted to, they offer other services, and I think that's just kind of clouding the issue. It's $3,000 a year for us to connect the public safety towers together. You know, we can add other things if we want to, but I think that's just clouding the issue at this point.
And there will be some savings, I don't know if it's been quantified yet, but we are paying for some copper lines, telephone lines that we won't need to be paying for. And I don't
Right.
know.
Those 3 lines, as David said, we'd be retiring 3 copper lines, and the cost of those is about $120 a month, so about $1,400 annually, so.
And unlike that
Can net
copper,
that
which
out
is
of the-
above ground, this would be below ground, right?
No,
It-
it'll be above
It'll still
It'll
be.
be
above
above
ground.
ground too.
It's right along
Yeah.
the pole to pole, the same way as our current municipal is.
Also, are you going to save then some money on the project by not having microwave transmitters and microwave receivers?
Yes.
Okay.
But that's way offset by the installation of fiber, right? That's gonna be much more expensive than the,
The engineering,
yeah.
It's a wash.
I was gonna, my
Really?
husband's a radio astronomer, I know what receivers cost
Okay.
and how hard they are to engineer to
It's
get the
not-
right.
We don't, based on what I've seen, and there's no increase at this point with the budget that was approved by
Oh, okay.
the board.
Because the fiber, I mean, I mentioned 1022 Westford, so we're running all the way down Westford Street to Sorley Farm essentially, but we also are running it out to Proctor Road, because there's a tower there, and then the connection past Bedford Road, so there's a
Okay.
decent amount of fiber.
I thought I had heard that you were gonna be coming and asking for
No,
more
we're,
funds for the fiber, but
No,
I was misinformed.
we
But I-
believe that we're still within our budget, and, you know, we won't know, you know, there's still a lot to be done.
With a better solution, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
But you're gonna have a yearly expense that you would not have had with your microwave, so that's the thing that we
Right,
have to
but about 1,400 of that, 3,000 is savings that we'll have, so the 3,000 isn't a net expense.
the 3,000, the yearly.
The recurring.
It's
Yeah.
1,600.
Because we're
Because we're already
currently
paying for the
paying
copper.
120 a month
Gotcha,
for,
all right. Now
So it's an
yes.
increase of
Copper that we
$1,600
increased.
a month.
Okay,
Mm.
And we're now not relying on it.
no, microwaves are, they're
$1,600 a
line of
year.
sight, and the
Right.
receivers are really tricky. You
and
know,
the money that was allocated is to build this, is to build the system. If there's money still in that at the end, some of that can go towards things like maintenance contracts and things like that, but a monthly payment for fiber will probably end up being in a budget line item, which is why it's appropriate to bring that to you at this time.
And we could stay with the copper, but we'd lose the advanced function.
Yeah,
Well, No.
The new system will not operate on copper.
Yeah, no, we can't use the copper.
Will it operate at all? I thought it was just this advanced function.
No, just, well, we need the advanced functions. We will be using those advanced functions as well.
Yeah.
The entire new system is based on having this kind of bandwidth available.
And then we can,
Copper is going away. That's, I mean, even if the system could use it, it's going away. The phone company is not supporting it.
Right.
So
I understand
that's
that.
another challenge.
It's not working when you go to use it. We have some backup copper circuits that we've used to nurse that kill, and invariably, when Patriots Day comes along and they go to test it, it's down. Just isn't working. And then they go fix it, and it works for a few days, and then it goes away again.
so, and I know that I had said, it's only clouding the issue, but it looks like we could even save more if we switched over to the internet at some point in the future. Yes, Bill?
Question, I misunderstood you, but did you say that Carlisle could install fiber on your poles to get us to own our own cable, fiber cable to, the 2 locations we need to go to?
So that was something that the chair said. It is possible to apply for for pole attachment and run fiber. That's something that's available to anybody that wants to do it. It's a pretty lengthy run. It would be quite expensive to add, 7 or 8, probably about 7 more miles to get all the way up to a Nurse Not Kill. So it would take a long time, I think, to pay that back on the savings that you'd get.
Plus, then we'd have to be the one going there and splicing it back together every time a tree fell on it.
Exactly.
And that's an important point, is the fiber within Carlisle, we will have to we will have to maintain it, and since, as was noted, since their public safety relies on their thing working, we have faith that they'll fix that part of it quickly, so that's another reason to stick with that. The other thing to be clear about is, because we discussed this in the committee, is one of the things one likes to have in public safety is redundancy, and we don't have a whole lot of redundancy. I mean, we have redundancy because we have towers that can pick up from others, but we won't have redundancy in the fiber, because we talked about what would happen if you ran both up Lowell Road and Bedford Road, but concluded that at this point in the game, let's do what we need to do, and that, again, would be a possible future thing to.
Plus, if it relied on our own fiber network, we still have that one single pole in the center of town that.
Yeah, right, I mean, redundancy does not mean, that it always works, it's just one more thing that can help if that, but yes, there's always gonna be the one pole that can take it all down no matter
It
what.
gains nothing, I think, at this
It
point, by
takes both
going
of them
down.
Somebody's gonna hit it as soon as.
I just wanna be clear.
You're gonna lose your automatic license plate reader on the car.
All right, so what's the next step for this? I guess.
Tim, I think
Good
it's,
question.
I think it's for you to approve proceeding with option 1 and moving through the contractual part of it. I don't know if you have a contract ready, but I think it's.
No, we don't, we'd have to refine the proposal in some respects, but I think we wanted the sense of the board that this was the way that,
I think it's the right path
We
to
should
go.
go.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you have the sense of the board.
okay. So we'll be back to you at some point.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Great, thank
Thank
you.
you, thanks for coming.
Better than microwave. Thank you very much, Mark.
You're welcome. If you have any other questions about any of it, feel free to let me know.
All right, we're back
Right on time.
on time. So let's move on to complete streets.
I did. I've got like 3 things on here. Which one do you want first?
Are you gonna be presenting something? Is that?
Yeah, I just have, we distributed the entire crosswalk safety analysis report. And, it's voluminous and we don't have a lot of time, so I cribbed out a PowerPoint.
Okay.
That I thought
So
might.
why don't we all go over here and if
And
you're
so
able to
just-
project, are you able to
Yeah,
project?
I just want that one last thing.
The last thing you said?
Yeah. I'm going to have a few comments before we start that, so let me just talk to you on the other side of the desk, I guess. So, as we all are aware, in the last few years, there has been an increased concern by residents about safety for pedestrians. We have seen it, more complaints coming through Traffic Safety Advisory Committee, through DPW, and to the Pathway Committee. So the town's been doing quite a bit. We've had forums. We've tried to gather as much community information as we can. We've held a couple forums, and we took a vote and approved a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit. So we're focused in on how to respond to and address the very real safety concerns that folks are experiencing in various parts of the town. So the Complete Streets group went through a process of evaluating existing conditions and design to look for weaknesses in access, connectivity, and came up with an inventory of many places around town that we could improve the circulation in our town, the safety of the users, the access by users. And that project did not go deep enough to look at the 3 crosswalks on Bedford Road. So you authorized expenditure of existing pathway funds for Samsky and McNary to do a very in-depth analysis of these 3 crosswalks, which could hopefully then provide a template for looking at other crosswalks around town. That each of them are representative in their own way of certain situations we can find elsewhere. So Samsky and McNary put together an analysis, and what they basically found, this is organized by the 3 crosswalks. So the next slide this is the library crosswalk. You're looking at it with the library up on your right. And their findings in summary is that, well, first of all, it's obvious this is a high pedestrian and high traffic use area. That this crosswalk is located in a non-signalized intersection. We have crosswalks not at intersections. Those not intersection places normally don't have signal, right? But this one is at an intersection and it doesn't have a signal, and that creates its own set of issues. The current speed limit is 25 miles an hour. That's not changed. That was what it was prior. The crosswalk's painted green. It's in fair condition, and it sits flush to the ground. And then there are 3 pedestrian signs, one 57 feet before you come into the rotary, one 8 feet on the other side coming towards Ferns, and one right in the center line, and you can see it in the green paint of the crosswalk. So that's the current conditions. What they found was that the stopping sight distances, SSDs, are adequate for the speed limits, that the pavement width is 26 feet at the ATM and library side, which is almost twice the normal driving lane. And that cars turning onto East Street can obstruct the vision and therefore reduce the SSDs of cars coming into the rotary from, say, Kimball's behind you. So it's a little, although the SSDs look great when you take into consideration how traffic comes in and out of the area, they're not really as strong as they appear. So the next slide Those are the conditions. I'm sorry, I just didn't poke through that. Go to the next one, please, Tim. And that's, okay, now. So those were the conditions. So the findings are the signage is not adequate. The signage is just ill-placed, doesn't really function to warn motorists that a crosswalk is coming, and they're not adequate to actually notify, here's the crosswalk. There are no detectable warnings at the curb cut, so this is an ADA access issue. And the road size, the width is really big, and there are no speed reducing elements that are in place. You just can go into the rotary from Concord Street, as an example, and if you're continuing straight in front of the library, you do not have to slow down. You can use that as a travel lane at full speed and still have full accommodation for a vehicle to go around the rotary and get out at Lowell or Westford. So it's way too big. So the recommendations are pretty straightforward. The first thing to address is how big that 26-foot wide area is in terms of contributing to high speed and pedestrian risk. So they're looking at that, and their recommendation is to raise the crosswalk and add road narrowing rumble strips. And then the second recommendation is to get the signs right, which, seems to be a good idea. And then, of course, make the curb cuts ADA compliant. And then add pavement marking. We should have a yield sign anyway, painted right on the road as you're approaching a crosswalk. But in this instance, because you're raising the crosswalk, to also notify drivers that you're gonna hit a raised crosswalk.
Are there curbs to cut?
Yes. Yes. If you're crossing from Ferns to the Middle Island to go all the way across the street opposite Ferns, those are all curb cuts going across. If you are crossing the pathway to go continue in front of the library, it's a curb cut, but there's no detectable warning system. So you just kind of drift in. So if you have any special needs that it has to do with vision, as an example, you may not know you're leaving a sidewalk. So this is the detectable portion, as opposed to being able to flow, uninterrupted. And then the other item is that the street lighting, and this is true in all the locations, is not located sufficiently close to where the crosswalks are, or have the lumens that are minimally necessary in order for a vehicle to see a pedestrian at night in a crosswalk. So,
other than that, it's great.
It's a dream. Could I have the next slide? 142 Bedford Road. Isn't that nice? Look how good that crosswalk looks. It's nice paint, brand new, well maintained. Could I have the next slide, please? So the conditions. The crosswalk is located mid-road and represents a continuation of the pathway. Speed limit was recently reduced. The crosswalk's painted green and in good condition. The stopping distances are adequate. The signage is not. It's when we put this in almost 3 years ago, we minimized brightness, height, and visibility to balance preservation, and kind of put it in as a test. Can we really achieve the outcome with a shorter, dimmer, lighted pedestrian crosswalk sign? And the answer is it just doesn't work. It hasn't worked. It's working less well the higher the traffic and the higher the volume. This year alone, we've had 3 traffic incidents in that crosswalk where pedestrians in the crosswalk were nearly hit by the car that was rear-ended. It might not be the car immediately in front of the pedestrian, but the car behind isn't seeing what's happening. So, and then the pedestrian warning sign, not the lighted sign, but the one that says, there's a pedestrian crossing here, it's in the way of the person standing to cross, so you can't see them.
If you go back to the slide, you can see that.
Yeah, you can see that, yeah, I've noticed.
So, yeah. See the kid in the back there?
Oh,
Sort of,
Yeah. Not really. Can I have the following slide? So, the findings in their report is that there were repeated incidents of pedestrian safety issues. There are no advance warning lights, so the only lights are right at the crosswalk. And you're in a rural area with winding roads, and if you're distracted, or you're speeding, or, or you're just, not the best driver, a advance warning light is really what's needed. And put in detectable curb cuts so that people with vision impairment can understand that they're leaving the pathway and going into the road. So those are the recommendations. Relocate the obstructing signage, upgrade the crosswalk to the prevailing standard, then add advance warning that synchronizes to the crosswalk lights themselves, paint some yield ahead markings on the pavement, and improve the lighting in the direct area of the crosswalk. Go to the last one.
And the prevailing standard is defined as?
Well, you go to the Mass Highway Department and you say, I want to put in a lighted pedestrian crosswalk. They show you 3 flavors, different heights, different sizes. What we have is not listed. Bandit Davis is an awful lot like 142. Let's look at the conditions. So this is considered another, sort of popular use crosswalk. The speeds have been reduced. The crosswalk is in okay condition. There seems to be adequate stopping distances. This is the science of it. It's kind of remarkable. You can point to the science that says, oh yeah, you could go 60 miles an hour because you have, 120, feet. But the reality is that people aren't getting, cars are going across crosswalks while people are in them. So the reality, the experience of stopping distances is different because they're predicated on the average driver. And there is, it's hard to determine just how much stopping distance you need for any one driver, right? And our problem is we have a lot of any one drivers going too fast, not looking at the road, and may have some other, issue, but those are the 2 big ones. The yield to the pedestrian signage is really not in the right place. So the signs themselves are not lighted at Banta. There's no detectable warnings. There's side obstruction due to the utility poles and the slope of the road. And there's no landing for pedestrians, and that's particularly difficult on the Banta Davis side. So the recommendations are to put in a landing, install the detectable warnings, add flashing signs at both crosswalks, and then also add another set of advance warning signs. Repaint the crosswalk and add yield pavement markings. And again, look at the lighting to see if it can be improved in terms of lumens and proximity. In looking at these recommendations, first of all, are there any questions about these? Sure.
What's a pedestrian landing?
I'm sorry?
What's a pedestrian landing?
Landing, that's you cross a crosswalk and you're waiting, or you come down the pathway and you're waiting to cross, and there isn't really sufficient room for more than one person, but it's supposed to carry a baseball team or kids waiting for a bus stop. It's a larger landing. It's a pad that can hold more than one person waiting to cross the road. Any other questions about, or is this, none of this is new, right? I mean,
Yeah, no, let's get through the whole presentation,
Yeah.
then we'll go over there and we'll ask our.
Yeah, okay, all right.
That way everybody can hear, because
Yeah.
we'll have the mics.
I think the other piece that I wanted to talk about was the process of what Complete Streets came up with and what Stamsky and McNary came up with, and I don't need an overhead to do that. You've got the handout so we can sit and talk.
Okay.
So when we engaged tech, their job was to analyze weaknesses, create an inventory, and prioritize it. And in doing that, they didn't have the scope to get into an in-depth crosswalk analysis and create sort of template type recommendations. And so it was decided that we really want to get that nailed down because that was in the most sort of urgent needs for safety. And so we hired Stamsky and McNary. They came up with this report. There's a lot of commonality between tech and Stamsky and McNary, but there are differences. And the differences are sufficient that when reviewed by TSAC in a joint committee meeting of TSAC and Complete Streets, it was determined that there are some parts of that Stamsky and McNary plan that we really need to implement under any circumstances. Some of it is paid for under the scope of what we're trying to do with the Complete Streets, but some of it is not contemplated. And you can't swap out whole different types of elements. So as an example, in the Complete Streets program, there are no raised sidewalks that are recommended. And
You mean crosswalks?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Crosswalks. And, there's a reason for that. I think the default position of tech as an engineering firm is that nobody wants them. So they're not going to, that's not how they want to address it, and that's not how their recommendation is going to read. On the other hand, if you don't have to drive very far, they are everywhere, especially in rural settings. And it was Stamsky and McNary's view that that's a really high impact change you could make to help that library crosswalk be memorable and safe for pedestrians. So that's a difference. The other differences that were important to TSAC and the Joint Committee of TSAC and Complete Streets was the addition of advanced pedestrian warning lights. We have the lights right at the crosswalks and at 142 and at Banta, but we don't have them in advance of it. And all the literature stuff you can read is you really need a two-part system to say something's about to happen and then something's happening. So those are the two that really sort of stand out as no matter what, we ought to really be thinking about doing that. There's one other piece that would be covered under Complete Streets, which is adding changing the pavement shape and size and texture around the rotary. So if we were to receive grant funds for this work, then part of that recommendation by Stamsky and McNary could be implemented under the tech Complete Streets scope. So the stuff that's outside of it is the raised crosswalk and 2 sets of advanced warning pedestrian lights. I provided a schedule that...
So that's the only difference between...
No.
Okay.
Do you have a Excel spreadsheet schedule that shows... Yes, exactly, that one. Now I have to find mine. Okay.
This isn't the same. I have
No. So what Melinda has done here, which is I think really helpful, is listed what all of Stamsky and McNary's recommendations are, and then looking at what TSAC and the Complete Streets really want to do and feel we need to do, and need to maybe identify money to get that done versus things that the DPW could do within its routine, operating budget. Tech and Complete Streets, as an example, did not recommend additional streetlights. No.
The Stamsky and McNary report recommended luminaires within 10 feet between
Right.
approaching vehicles and crosswalks,
Right,
which
but,
we didn't.
But that wasn't in the Complete Streets scope.
No, it wasn't in
Right.
the.
So that's another difference. And in looking at that difference, in thinking about limited funds and having to pick, it was the view of TSAC that if you were going to take an absolute, no funding's available. What is the minimum thing we should be doing to solve this problem? It's the view of the committees that we need to raise the crosswalk, we need to add a rumble strip, and we need to put the lights in. And that takes abandoning a $400,000 safety enhancement plan down to 115, but have it directly focused on the most critical pieces of safety for those crosswalks. If we were to get all of the funds, the missing pieces under the complete streets is the raised crosswalk and the additional set of lights. And that would add $50,000 not contemplated in the $400,000 grant. It's not swappable with other elements within the grant, were we to win the grant. So the two scenarios are pretty straightforward. We know we need to make some corrections and improvements to the 3 crosswalks on Bedford Road. It's generally understood that these crosswalks are an issue.
Based on what data?
Experience of the town, traffic incident reports, 3 people nearly run down on 142. The police chief and Gary Davis, the DPW, receive a lot of complaints, but this, I think, is in response also to the numbers of community members who have shown up and said, I don't want my kids on that street.
I understand all that.
And I don't know that there's a hurdle rate to say, okay, under 5 crashes, it's probably okay. More than 5 crashes, it's unacceptable. So based on data implies that there's an acceptable hurdle.
Well, we're not talking about crashes here. We're talking about pedestrian safety,
Right.
correct?
Exactly.
How many pedestrians get hit or closely hit that other than anecdotal?
We don't have
There are no
close to.
data.
Oh,
but
no, we have experience with that.
Right.
At the crosswalk at 142, there have been crashes there with pedestrians? With pedestrian waiting to cross, one car stops and another car rear ends and pushes into the crosswalk.
I understand that, and
Are you mean getting pedestrians?
that tells you that your crosswalk is more dangerous than if you didn't have one. If the pedestrian waited for the cars to go by instead of the cars having to stop.
So the issue with this particular crosswalk at 142, Alan, is that the crosswalk itself is the pathway. In order, okay, so you are going to use this, whether it's in the best place or not. When Stamsky and McNary looked at the location, the siding of the crosswalk, and when Complete Streets looked at the siding of the crosswalk, they have both agreed there is no better place for the sidewalk than where it is. And 10 years ago, the conditions present are very different than those today. And so, it's hard to have hard data on near misses because those are really only known anecdotally. We don't have a method of capturing near misses. The beauty of it is that we don't have actual hits, right? but there have been enough close calls to make it an alarming environment for crossing, particularly when it's used by so many people in town to get from the center of town out to Kimball's or to get onto a trail system, or the kids to go on field trips to, we just,
We'll never know whether it worked or not.
What we know is that the traffic light, the pedestrian light, the lighted sign has had no impact.
Correct.
Okay, that's the only thing we know for sure.
Yeah. And
Right.
data across the country would have predicted that.
Exactly. But there is data that says if you change the driver's experience, if you give more warnings, that you can have an impact. Do you agree with that?
I do. I think that the double sign issue is very good, in fact, and there are data which indicate that, in fact, it doesn't change crashes or anything. It does change speed.
It does change speed,
Yes.
which in turn can change crashes.
It can.
Yeah.
It generally doesn't, but it can. Yeah.
There was a study done in, I think it was, I don't know if it was Norway, but it did a study where if cars travel no faster than 15 miles an hour, there are no pedestrian fatalities. And the reason is that there are far fewer collisions, right? But if you get hit at 15 miles an hour, you can survive it, which is kind of like,
I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
Just to not have that happen, but.
I guess, question I have is, so according to what I'm reading here, and I think what you said before, raising the sidewalk is the #1 priority.
Crosswalk, yeah.
For the crosswalk, yes. But that's not at all what tech said.
Right.
So I'm struggling with how that became the #1 priority when the consulting company that we hired didn't say that we should do that. And I understand what you said, but it just makes it hard for me to say, yeah, that is the #1 priority. But also, the tech, so I read through everything that I had that tech had provided, and unfortunately what I didn't have was the thing that, the PowerPoint that had the picture of each section of what they were recommending. But they did have in their budget things to address the crosswalks.
They do.
But no description of what they were going to do. I'm still hoping that we're gonna get their proposal from us, out to us, because there has to be something behind the numbers that they gave. But they are also talking about, and this is just based upon memory because I don't have anything, they were talking about adjusting the width of the road in front of the library.
Yes.
Because of the ability to go by.
Right. So those are consistent between the two engineering firms, narrowing that wide area of pathway, putting an apron around, doing all things you can to have a car come into the rotary, and if it's continuing on the rotary, to stay in that circle and only be able to leave it when it gets to the next exit point, as opposed to, leaving.
Yeah.
So is it helpful to look side by side of the tech, the concept, and then the one that was provided by Stansky McNary? Because
I guess first of all, I just want to start by, let's maybe jump to the ending and say, what are you asking for? So is this saying that you're asking for $50,000 that the town would vote to augment the grant?
Mm-hmm.
And it would go along with all of that construction?
Mm-hmm.
Or are you asking for, we want to do this, all of this $115,000,
Mm-hmm.
and it's going to be on a different timeline than, in a different project than what?
Right.
tech
So,
might be doing?
what we're recommending is to address the safety at the crosswalks, and we provide 2 scenarios for you can ponder this, but the recommendation is that if we don't get Complete Streets funding, there are certain things that should be done to improve the safety at the crosswalks.
that we can't wait another year.
That we can't wait until we reapply and maybe see if we get it. This was something that was sort of kind of urgent, important matter to ameliorate the safety issues. So, that's the worst case scenario. We don't get any funding. The minimum things that we feel, the recommendation from TSAC and Complete Streets Working Group was that narrowing the rotary, using the rumble strips, raising that crosswalk, providing signage at the library crosswalk. At 142 Bedford Road, providing the flashing signage and advanced warning flashing signage, and same at Banta Davis. So those were the sort of big ticket items that we felt would require, some source of funds. The other ones, when we talked to Gary, he felt that some of these things were, he could incorporate the other safety improvements.
As an example, the curb cuts and detectable warning recommendations, we would hold those to when we had a bigger capital funding for the whole rotary design, which either we'll choose to fund without state funding or with it. But those aren't as urgent as just getting the crosswalks practically safe. So the 115 isn't abandoning the Complete Streets recommendation. It's saying it would have been great to get the grant, but we didn't get it. So do we need to do anything? Should we just wait? and maybe we don't get it next year, and maybe we don't get it the following year. And it was the view of TSAC that these crosswalks need addressing. And so this is, the request for 115 has to do with waiting till we hear on this next round of whether or not we got funds. If we didn't, to then take some action to correct these 3 crosswalks in the immediate term, and then continue to look for grant funds in the prioritization. And if we find that our priorities need to be met sooner than grants, then we can come to town meeting and ask for money for those. But this is a baby step of, let's take 3 out of the 20 things that were in the tech prioritization and get those done.
So can I just, I just want to walk through, just make sure I understand what these things are saying, because there's different requests for the one in town than there are for the other ones. So DPW would move the yield signs, right? DPW would put in advanced warning signage?
Not lighted.
So it's just a regular sign.
Just a regular sign. And then DPW would put in pedestrian crossing signage, which I think is there, right?
It would be, this is really move it.
Move it, okay.
Instead of being in the middle of this.
Or
so then the
eight.
next-
The low to high.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so the next 2 are ones that we would contract out. And then DPW would do the pavement markings. I'm like, what's that?
Yield.
White paint on the road to just indicate that there's a raised crosswalk.
And then the other 2 are those ones that you just decided not to do?
Yes, that those would be part of, Gary has been talking about doing a rotary redesign and resurfacing. That would be the time to do that.
Including the new, because it looks like this is adding streetlights.
Well,
Or
yes,
moving,
but we're not,
adding, moving.
it's not clear to us that that's what we need to do. We have, text recommendations. If you get a raise, this was the rationale of TSAC. If you raise the crosswalk, you put signs where they belong, you paint in the pavement, say you're gonna hit a bump and you should yield, you're gonna go a really long way to having an impact. You can always add streetlights. You can always add streetlights. When you go to the Historical Commission, the first thing, they were very interested in the raised crosswalk. They were interested in the rumble strips in a very supportive way. They do not want lighted pedestrian signs unless it's absolutely necessary, and they don't want to make town center any brighter. So working within the context of Carlisle, these are the actions that just turn out to also have the biggest impact on pedestrians.
Okay. And then, we don't have to go through both of the next 2 because they're the same. But 142 is moving the signs because we couldn't see the child behind it. And then these are lighted signs, these next 2?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Those
they
are the
flashing
ones,
lighted
yeah, those are the
signs?
ones, have you seen on Route 27 where the Bruce Freeman Trail,
Mhm.
they're similar to that, they're the rectangular, rapid flashing beacons.
Okay, so it's
Kimball,
replacing the ones that we already bought with different things. I think we even still have one brand new one sitting in a warehouse somewhere.
Oh, really?
I don't think it's replacing it, I think it's, we maintain the ones that we already have, and then we add another one
She said we're
before it.
replacing it. 'cause
We're
it wasn't
removing
for
it.
the-
The design of that lighted sign
Yeah.
is no longer recommended.
Oh, that was the one that was low?
Yes. No.
Oh,
it's
no,
a-
there's the diamond sign that has the little yellow lights, but it's really been ineffective at,
What happens when you just jump to a solution?
Well, no, this is actually what happens when you have the standard recommended by the state, that it be so tall, so bright, and so visible. And then you bring it to the town, and you have community input, and you try to work within the context of the community. And the stomach of the community was, we don't want a really big, tall, super bright flashing light. Can't we try something smaller? And that's what we did.
Mm-hmm.
That was intentional.
These,
I don't remember that ever.
these would be pedestrian activated,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, the advanced one is
It would be
synchronized.
linked, yeah, to the one when they push the button, they would both flash.
Similar to what's on Westford Street at Kimball's.
I can tell you that TSAC was very unhappy that the features of that sign got so minimized, because it wasn't clear to us that we had any data that that works. And when you look at Complete Streets in Stansky and McNary, you can't, and here's their list of equipment, you don't see our sign there.
So can I just ask a question? Before we leave the Rotary there, so these rumble strips, right, so it's suggested by both. I mean, I think that it's a fantastic idea. I mean, you gotta get rid of that straight shot all the way through.
No,
Excuse me.
no, it wasn't a rumble strip on tech. It was narrowing it with
Yeah, so
paint and landscaping and.
Right, so it actually forced people to slow down, stay in the road, right? So I guess my concern is that, you know, if we do this and then ultimately we get the Complete Streets, are we gonna rip these out?
Yep.
So that's 35 grand.
That's right.
Yeah, so it would change.
The rumble strip
If
is
we-
the one thing that if we got the Complete Streets grant, the rotary redesign would accomplish that narrowing
Right.
and slow down the traffic.
Right.
That without the Complete Streets funding, these rumble strips here that are proposed would be the ones that would then cause that traffic to. So yeah, that would be. You're right.
Right,
If,
so-
if later we
yeah.
got it,
You'd
and we
have
were-
to mill those out.
When are we gonna hear about
Yeah.
Complete Streets?
Yeah.
They said by the end of the year, end of December.
They're telling us now December, January.
maybe by mid.
Could those rumble strips be, you know, done with paint and bollards, or, you know, big pieces of?
We
Got
asked
a
that.
block in town, yeah.
We
Well, you
asked.
know what I mean.
Yeah, we asked about other, methods, paint, or
Well, paint
cobblestones.
is not gonna do it, because
Right.
people can drive over paint.
Right,
But
and
I was just thinking-
cobblestones and.
There's old
Yes,
fire
there
trucks.
you go.
Yeah, some of those-
The back seats from the new place.
No, and it really was, that's what they landed on. It said this was gonna be the most effective.
Yeah.
And
And the purpose of that is just to slow traffic.
It is.
And
Yeah,
if we-
forces people around.
If we never get funding, we wait year after year, we're not gonna have the narrowing because we didn't raise the funds unless we choose as a town to say, okay, we're gonna consider the 35 a sunk cost and raise more money.
Or we take a look at it and we say, I realize it's already 25 there, but, we've reduced the speed limit, and one of the arguments of that was slow it down earlier coming into town, you're gonna have it slower in town. We raise the crosswalk, and we see what happens with Complete Streets, and we don't do the rumble street.
What does raising the crosswalk do the first time a car gets there?
That's a suspension, so they don't wanna do it a second time.
I mean, that's the.
That's it.
Okay, so you're.
They're like, wow.
It's essentially the Chelmsford,
markings,
the
so-
Chelmsford
It's the
approach.
Chelmsford
You don't do that twice.
Right.
No,
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
right.
And hopefully and presumably, the pavement markings would indicate that you should be slowing down.
Yeah, good luck.
But the engineers really felt like the two things together would maximize the safety there, the rumble strips and the raising the crosswalks together. But,
If we don't narrow the road,
when you're
The-
coming away from the rotary out, people are picking up speed there.
Well, they're not even slowing down. I mean, I definitely think that needs to be done. The thing is, though, I mean, we're already basically in December, So, I mean, waiting a month, because this isn't gonna get done in.
no, the idea here is that you're in the middle of your 2019 operating budget and capital budgets. And so we came as a pathway committee in January looking for capital funds, and we were woefully late in that process.
Yeah, no, I
So we're
understand
here
that,
to
yeah.
say, if you're looking for capital requests and you consider 115 big enough, maybe it's Chapter 90 funds, maybe part of it's funded internally, but the zero fund grant, zero grant column, we're coming to you earlier.
Okay, yeah, so this isn't to be implemented right now.
No, this is
Gotcha,
to
okay.
plan,
That's
This is, they're talking about this as a warrant.
or not.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, see, oh, go ahead.
sorry,
No, go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
No, but part of it was, I thought the discussion last year was that, if for some reason the Complete Streets doesn't get funded, right, we're gonna try to figure out a way to get a lot of this out of Gary's budget. And then what we would try to do is You know how he's got that snow, maybe I'm completely wrong, but you know how he's got that overage, right, for snow and whatnot?
That was for, that was for the.
Design?
The design.
Yeah.
It wasn't for any implementation.
No.
Right, so when we said
He doesn't have
Complete
that much
Streets
money.
would
No, but it
give
was
us
still like
400,000 in
50,000.
construction funds,
Yeah.
but they won't pay for any of the engineering design,
Right, right,
so
right.
that was
No,
the
I-
50,000 then.
Okay, but it was still, it was 50 grand.
Yeah.
Right? So that paid for this. This wasn't paid for with the pathway.
No, that was, we used the Pathways
Pathway funds,
funds
right.
to
So-
fund the crosswalk savings.
Right, so that 50 hasn't been spent yet.
No,
Right,
because
Right.
we're not gonna spend it unless we get the grant, right?
Right.
right.
Yeah.
But my point is that if we don't get the grant, there's still that same 50-ish thousand. You know, that money hasn't gone anywhere yet.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and we can use that to implement some of this and then kind of go from there, you know?
The thing that makes this so hard for me is that none of this will guarantee anything relative to safety.
Right.
There are no guarantees in any of this. We're sort of being held hostage by the notion that, well, if we don't do anything and something happens, shame on us. So we ought to do something, right? We ought to be able to say, we've done something to address the potential for unsafe conditions.
Well,
This, today, when I was driving around the Rotary, it once again reminded me that not everyone knows to yield when someone's in the Rotary. It almost wiped me out.
yeah.
And one of my sons came that close to being killed in the Rotary at 4:30 on a November afternoon when the sun was shining right in the eyes of an oncoming motorist who couldn't see anything but continued to drive around the Rotary and wipe my son out.
You know-
So it gets to be, if we did all the things here, let the DPW do everything it can do, it would certainly show that we're doing something, right? And we wouldn't have to spend any more money.
You know, it's hard to repeat every TSAC meeting and consideration here. And so when I sit and say, well, we had this conversation, you know, it doesn't really have that much weight. But I would say that the police chief and the DPW chief and Tim and I and other people in the room who had an interest in looking at this went through each item one by one and said, we can live without that, we can live with that, you know what, we can work around that, we can do this. And this was your professional staff's best recommendation. And I'm the person presenting it, and I'm the schmo, right? So,
It's usually John, so you're lucky. John always draws the short straw.
I am in fact attempting to speak for TSAC when I say this was what, in their professional experience, considers to be appropriate changes in this next year. And it may be that there's funding inside the DPW budget. It may be, there are other places to get I don't know. It's we don't want to get trapped in telling you, here's the best place to get the money from. We don't know. That's not our, that's not our job, right? But we do know that if let me put it this way, we put together a complete streets application, and it was for shovel-ready jobs. And that means that towns already spent the $50,000 we have not spent, which makes them higher candidates to get a grant than us, right? So we're trying to see if we can get the grant first before we spend the design funds. And, we may be successful, but that's a long shot. That's shovel-ready isn't, we'll find design funds after you give us an approval. So we know through all these community forums, all the feedback, that residents are really concerned about these. The school community is concerned. Each demographic in town is concerned about it. So are we coming here and saying we have to spend $400,000 and do tier one? No, we're saying, you may have a different view, you may have a better view. It is simply the view of TSAC that this would be the minimum effort.
I guess
the question that I have, and, you know, I don't want this to be taken as I'm being negative about it. But the question that I have is and I may be wrong because I don't have a complete tech thing, but it seems like the highest priorities that you want to ask for the funding for aren't even in the Complete Streets grant.
This is the frustration.
I'm really, really struggling
Yeah.
with that. So
Well, so the
we've asked
signage
town
is, the
for
signage-
something, and there's a lot of really, really, I think, obvious great things that they put in there. You know, the straightening of the roads, the narrowing of the roads, the fixing of the circle, and you know, they do address some of the crosswalks. They do address the crosswalk at the library. But we're not going for that in this, and I'm struggling with why.
Okay, so if I might, when we met with Tech and we asked them, what is in your portfolio of solutions? Here's what we think the portfolio of solutions includes. And in that, we had, through the DPW and the police chief, all the things that they had, lighting and signage and whatever, and we also had raised crosswalks, crosswalk tables, and rumble strips. And their response was, they find towns do not really support those, and they therefore don't include them in their portfolio. So they don't even consider it. And we said, well, we might consider it. You know, what if we said, hey, I think we might be interested in a raised crosswalk? Would you, could you? No, they're completely negative to that. So we got a report that.
This is because they didn't want to put it in, and because of that, you know, I think that if we were to do this, and I have no problem with the 50,000. I think we want to talk about the 115, but I think that we'd want to make it a warrant article because I think we would want the town to decide.
Sure.
Or do they want, you know, it is tech right, towns don't want to raise sidewalk.
Right.
Make it a warrant article, let the town decide, do they want to raise sidewalk? It makes sense to me.
Yeah,
but
I think the reason why it's in Stansky and McNary's report is because they have a better sense of our town. And Tech is looking at, sort of a template, monolithic way of how towns react. And, the product we have from Tech is the product, we would expect from that process. And the thought process in the Stansky and McNary is what you would expect from Stansky and McNary with, specific experience in public and private projects here.
Mm-hmm.
Tech has not done anything in Carlisle but a recommendation 11 years ago that was precisely the recommendation that they were informed was not implementable. And then that was the only recommendation they provided us after 6 months of waiting.
About the rest of their report.
Yeah, well.
Right? I mean, we based the whole grant based upon
Right.
their plan.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I'm very
we
disappointed.
don't have faith in them on that.
I think, as you said, if you look at what they've listed, so much of it is really kind of obvious, right? You got to fix the rotary, you got to narrow the roads, you got to do, there's things you just have to do. And we went through this process with them in part. I think, maybe I have this completely wrong, but I think part of the reason we went through this process was to qualify for competing for grant money, right?
Yeah, no, that's
Well,
exactly
it was, yes, yeah, because I guess the design is what we have the other 50,000 for.
Because in a lot of their design stuff.
But are they going to be carrying that forward? Are they going to be?
They will want to bid on it, and that's up to us.
Okay, so we're done with them at this point.
I don't have any.
Unless we sign them for a new thing.
Right. Well, we're not done until we get the report, the bridge report between the inventory and the recommendation, right?
Mm-hmm.
The thing you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
I believe they owe that to us because in the scope, we are supposed to be provided with community education and information materials that would be used in PowerPoint presentations and handouts, and we don't have any of that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's how we get there.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I think a lot of their design pieces do actually slow traffic down because it goes beyond just,
absolutely.
That rotary piece. There's the whole piece from East Street where
Yeah.
you force people to take that right. You know, there's a whole piece going on to Westford where you're forcing people to stop and take that, right?
Because honestly, you can drive right over a rumble strip.
Yeah, no, exactly,
This-
so.
It was with curbs and that landscape, and that's why I was wondering if you would
Yeah,
add
that's,
bollards or
that
whatever.
made a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't think what they've done is a complete loss. It just doesn't implement some of the pieces that, you know, so not having a raised crosswalk, for example, coming out of the rotary when you have to slow down and turn, it works for one direction, it may not work for the other direction. You know, and that's just one of those things that we know Carlisle better than they do, and, you know, one would think of them being the vendor and us being the client, we would say, we would like this, they would put it in, but.
Yeah, I don't have an argument with any of this. I think my only disappointment is we're still waiting for, I think, a piece of information
Yeah,
that would be helpful for us, especially when we go to town meeting, as an example, and ask for funds, $50,000 to support this. When we go to the historical commission and try to explain why did these things get identified? You know, it's a really valuable tool.
Well, the question is, when is enough, right? Right? I mean, isn't that?
Well, can we push on them to do
Speed is
better?
obviously one of the
I think
things
Tim is
that,
doing that.
Yeah, I mean.
that is a
Yeah, I'm talking to him tomorrow.
primary factor in
Engineer.
the safety issue. We haven't digested our speed limit reduction yet. And we won't probably for a few more months. So, I mean, if we're continuing to do things which attack that problem, I think we should continue to do that within our ability to do it.
I think the double traffic lights on 142 and Banta, advance and at location, are fundamental.
Because by the time you get there, you're
it's already
already looking, yeah.
Mm.
And again, a lot of this, I mean, some of these things are only effective at night, when there's hardly any pedestrian traffic at all. There it's up to the pedestrian to avoid the car, not the car to avoid the pedestrian.
Is that with the luminaries closer to the?
Well,
raised segment?
we know street lighting doesn't work in terms of pedestrians. That's ridiculous, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of data on that. But it's because, first of all, they almost put it directly over the pedestrian, and vertical illuminance does nothing for visibility. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But yeah, the double signage, very important. When you come down, when you're doing 30, I don't care how fast you're going, 25 or 40, and you suddenly come up upon a pedestrian crosswalk, and now you start looking, is there a pedestrian there, so I have to stop for
exactly.
them.
And then you look in the rearview mirror to see if there's
Yeah.
somebody that's tailgating, so if I
Yeah.
stop for
Yeah.
them, well, they
I
ran
mean,
into
that's
me.
true with Carlisle. I mean, it's worse in Cambridge. Are they gonna cross or aren't they gonna cross?
Yeah.
And it's, I mean, that whole law is questionable, but it's.
Have we had our liability insurance company look at any of this?
I'm not aware of that.
Would they weigh in on it in any way, that these are things that
It
are
has.
obviously
We
not
haven't done
safe
that
and should
so
be
far,
addressed?
but, yeah,
I mean, I just wonder, is that something that would be helpful?
well, you make a note.
Because I don't think we're consciously doing anything that's unsafe.
No, that's not the point at all.
I know, but I
Yeah.
mean, again, it gets back to this, when is enough, and are you
Right.
doing enough? When,
It's going to reduce,
Done
it's
enough.
going to reduce complaints.
I think, you know
Okay,
what,
So I just to wrap this up, we're gonna hear about the grant in January.
Late December,
Hopefully.
Yeah,
early January,
right.
hopefully.
You know, hopefully by the end of January. So we should have a warrant ready in case we don't get it, and even in case we do, if we wanna add the raised sidewalk. But I think that you were saying that
And advance warning.
the advance warning things were in the grant?
There are, not enough in the grant. That's why you
That's the
see,
30,000
yeah, that's why you
additional.
see that
Yes.
they're, the
So
advanced
whatever
ones are
happens,
not
we're
in the
gonna
grant.
wanna ask for a warrant article of 50,000. And we might just wanna have in our back pocket a warrant article of 115,000.
we were thinking of one up to 115 to allow us to,
Just do one.
Yeah, up to
or one
115.
for it, Up to 115, and then at the, meeting.
Well, I
you
wouldn't wanna
would-
do that, because then we're fundraising for 115 when we don't need to.
Right.
We don't know we need to, right, yeah.
Well,
we
we
just
would
don't have to
hear
allocate
about
the
it.
money.
allocate the full 115,000.
Yeah.
So
We
we
would hear
would, we
before
would
town
want to
meeting.
either put in the
Right,
warrant
we'll know
book
before.
50 or 115.
Right, but we'll know well before.
And we'll know before the end of
No, but
January.
it sounds like you're not overly sanguine about getting it, because we have not done the shovel, we have not done the engineering, we haven't spent the 50K.
You know, we put,
to
we,
make it shovel ready.
we've put together a really strong application, but compared to other communities, it has weaknesses. And the weaknesses are we have not done the design work, and we are not providing for any explicit bicycle access. And so Complete Streets is for all users, and our design is for motorists and pedestrians.
Are we making it worse for bicycles?
Potentially with the curbs.
No, they won't just ride into the rotary.
Right in the middle of the road.
Yeah, they just, well, they just ride in front of it.
Melinda and I learned all about Cape Cod berm today at the asphalt workshop in Lexington. Woo!
On, cardboarding, they adopted Cape Cod berm.
Yeah.
1971.
So I guess, but does that mean that if we don't get this award, that we should redo the application to include something for bicycles?
We will reapply.
Yeah.
But I think my understanding of it is,
I don't want to then, then we're sitting here and we're saying, well, we got to make it safer for bicycles because we have, we're having people get hit on bicycles.
We don't have the pavement
Yeah.
for bicycle lanes, so we can't really, we really can't, we could add a painted lane within a travel lane that has a white symbol for a bicyclist on it, but we can't actually have a dedicated minimum 5-foot wide pedestrian lane in our roads going through town because they're not wide enough.
Right, but what is our conversation 2 years from now?
Paint.
When in the center of town, because we've just said, we could have made it worse because of all the curbing, what are we doing because bicycles are being hit in the center of town?
Do it, the alternative without having a specific identified pathway is to put paint on the road of a 3-foot width that's, bright and indicates that if a cyclist is in that lane, the traffic law is they have the right of way.
So then, is that a way of addressing, if we don't get the grant, the weakness in the grant?
Yes.
To put that in, that
Yes.
we would be doing?
Yes.
You can address the bicycle issue without solving it.
Yes, you can address it without solving it, but you will do it in the context of what Carlisle looks, wants, and feels, and paint is not a favorite.
Mhm.
If for some,
But it could make it potentially more likely that we would get the grant if we don't get it the first time.
Exactly.
yeah, so do they tell you, these are the reasons you didn't get it, or is it
I don't
just
know.
you don't get it?
We're hoping for a
I
debrief.
haven't-
Yeah, what do you get?
Yeah,
yes,
because we
or-
would need that in order to reapply, we would incorporate their feedback,
Yeah.
so I think
Well,
we're
that's exactly
taking
it, yeah,
feedback.
they should.
Yeah.
Okay.
'Cause I-
Thank you.
It's really a mishmash, I apologize for that.
No,
It's just is what it,
Really, really, really large project.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's involved.
it is.
Thank you both for working on it.
And it's a lot of moving parts.
And for going to Cape Cod berm. Lexington.
Asphalt work.
Asphalt workshop.
Asphalt workshop.
Yeah.
I don't know, what made you think that was what you wanted to spend your Tuesday doing?
We had.
We even got to put yellow vests on, I mean,
We're
damn.
having a field trip and everything.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's what Brook Street needs.
So what are the next steps?
Don't go there.
So what would be the next step?
I think I would say work with Tim on what a warrant article might look like for a $50,000 ask. And to have in the back pocket potentially a $115,000 ask in case we don't get the grant.
And what's the process with FinCom? They're gonna wanna know about this, so what do you?
Yeah, so you're gonna be getting timelines from them soon, right? So we have our,
They're in their timeline. They
Right.
wanna know about warrant articles now, so what do we tell them about 2 different potential warrant articles?
yes.
Well, they'll
we
be
can tell
setting
them.
out their guidance, I would think, in December. I mean, this
Yeah.
is still preliminary to that.
But it wouldn't be inappropriate to send Victor or somebody on FinCom that we're discussing the possibility of drafting 2 warrant articles.
Should we
That would be
go?
fine, and we can
And they're
mention
coming-
it to them
They'd
in 2
appreciate it.
weeks.
Coming on the
We're having a
11th
joint
too,
meeting with them
Okay.
in 2 weeks.
We should go there, should we go there on their agenda and just tell them about this?
If you, yeah, if
Yeah,
you'd
you
like
can.
to.
Yeah, and you can tell them you've already
You're not
been
gonna,
here.
you're not gonna
Yeah.
make them mad by telling them early.
Right.
Yes.
Well, that's what we were thinking, we should get there and.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
And just let them know that you've talked with us,
Mhm.
and then, you know, kind of what our general
Right.
consensus is, and then, I mean, even though we haven't said anything, you know, obviously, we're supportive of putting something on the warrant. You know, because then otherwise they'll come back and say, oh, well, what did the Board of Selectmen say?
Yeah,
You know,
right.
What did FinCom say? You know, it's that whole back.
Do you want to see more community forums to discuss, you know, the crosswalk changes and/or more about the detail of complete streets, just informational?
I think what we just don't have any detail about the complete streets, right?
Yeah, so that's why
I mean,
we're.
that's all the design, I guess that's the design,
Yeah.
the design phase, so I think until we get that, but yes, I think we need to involve the community
Yeah.
a lot more,
Right.
The first
particularly when we
the
get
first
to the design
3,000
and what
we
we're
did.
doing in the center of town.
Right.
And I worry that the least
We could find some
favorable
more
thing
if
that
we
we
had
would
to
be
for
doing is
something
raising
small.
that crosswalk.
Yeah. It's so interesting that the feedback at the Historical Commission was, you know, neutral to positive, but they all, you know, sort of, when we talked about lights,
Yeah,
signal.
it changes the character, let's change
And you
the
have
character.
talked to Historical Commission?
Yeah, I did the Complete Streets presentation to them, and they had some observations, but the thing that really, you know, they're thrilled over the 25-mile-an-hour speed limit. It seems that they feel that rumble strips is appropriate in the center. They like the idea, if we ever get to the rotary design, of putting an apron,
Yeah,
you know.
like that.
But if you say, I want a flashing light,
No.
Yeah.
that's when things get tough.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, probably people in the center of town
Uh-oh.
are gonna say
What are you doing over there?
the same thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 Does
It's
anyone
not like
remember?
it flashes continually, it only flashes when somebody.
It
pushes
uses
the
Pushes the button.
You know, I mean,
Does anyone remember, what did Gary say about where the Rotary work was in his own timeline? Was he projecting that out 2 years? Do you remember?
I don't think he was definite.
Yeah.
It wasn't definite?
Yeah.
I
Okay.
think it's a, yes, we need to do it. technically.
Right. Yeah.
Just gotta get the brush off Brook Street first.
All right, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Yeah, what-
you
what-
told
what
me
were they
not to
talking
go there.
Okay,
It's
so
not brush, first of all, it's big logs.
I would like
Yeah.
to propose that we
And
hold
brush
off on the
is the
minutes
homeowner
until
problem.
next meeting
Yeah,
because,
I didn't have a chance to read 'em.
because they were just in the packet. Is everybody okay with that?
What was this? I was talking, I'm
Doesn't
sorry.
matter, you weren't in here.
good.
So, town administrator, we already
Did
did
that.
that, liaison reports?
Wait a minute.
Nothing here?
I have, liaison report from FinCom, I know we're gonna see them next week, or next meeting. They just got a presentation from the High School, who have just completed a zero-based, budgeting process, which I think the FinCom was very pleased about because it gives a lot more transparency to show what's going on. Basically, but the sticking point is they're on warning, on sort of probation with their bond rating status because they dipped into excess and deficiency funds last year in order to fund their OPEB account. And I think FinCom would like, and they have, the CCH, the Regional School Committee, has a goal of getting to the ARC, to getting to the minimum with their OPEB. And I think FinCom is interested in their not being so aggressive about the OPEB funding to preserve their bond rating and also not raise their taxes. So that was something, that was a message that the FinCom wanted you guys to hear and to think about. Because they will become, the school committee will be coming to us, and they wanted us to be prepared for what was going to be on the agenda.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty good write-up in the mosquito on that process tonight.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, right now, it's looking like a fairly sizable increase.
It was almost
Yeah.
5%.
5%.
Yes,
Yeah.
so,
And I don't, I guess one of the things that I kind of threw out there was why, you know, the argument always is, well, there's like a 2% built-in, you know, increase in the, you know, contractually. So why don't we just say, okay, your increase is 2%, right? And, you know, because that is more than what it would require just to do this, the salaries. I mean, you know, if there's a built-in increase, why is that you know, why is the increase that they're asking for higher than the built-in increase? And now I understand that, you know, like, I think they're saying it's 3% right now, and then there's the other 2% is because of OPEB and not cutting this fund. Question I had is, where is this fund funded from? Because it's, you know,
from same things from over the years, excesses,
the cuts
excess and
are
deficiency.
huge. You know, it was 670,000, I mean, that's.
In order to maintain their bonding.
That's, you know,
That's a
but-
requirement.
Yeah.
But
I
the
mean, it's
OPEB
like-
is not a strong, it's not as strong, it's a requirement, but not as strong a requirement, and we're just.
Right, well, I mean, I think that OPEB is a completely different thing, in my opinion. You know, I think that we should decide whether or not we're gonna do OPEB, and I think we should be deciding that outside of the budget, because it's not built into the budget, right? And I think we do need to get there, it is an obligation that we need to do.
But the school has their own, see, the regional school has their own OPEB that they have to do, and so that.
Right, and which makes it, you know, in that case, it's the only one that does, right?
Right.
But I think, you know, you know, so I think that gets at that gets at the OPEB, right? But how did we, so is OPEB a 2% increase?
No, it's more, because they had they want to get to a certain level, and in order to get to that certain level, then they raided their E&D, because we weren't willing to give them that extra increase to get the OPEB up, and now they've damaged their E&D, and so now they want the OPEB, and basically.
And I think they need to find it elsewhere in their budget.
Yes, that might also be true.
Right,
You know,
so, okay.
That's, anyway, that's part of the discussion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess I just don't understand why, like, if contractually it's a 2% salary increase, why is the starting point higher than that?
I have also asked, and I haven't gotten this information yet, I wanna know about their enrollments. You know, I know about, we're a smaller percentage of their enrollment, but I also know our enrollments are going down. Are theirs also going down? Are we paying the 2% increase for less enrollment, you know, or are they we don't have that, that piece yet, and I did ask Victor, and I believe that the next time FinCom meets with them, they will be asking them for that as well.
Okay, great, anything else?
I have CPC news.
Oh, yes.
So we heard the state match, it's 19%. Yeah, it's
Wow.
higher than the past couple of years, so it's
Yeah.
gonna be about 86,000.
I had heard a couple of years ago that it was due to go up.
Yeah, so it's about 86 grand. Priscilla's pulling the numbers together. Typically, I send out the memo around Thanksgiving that says, you know, kind of the request for applications. It's gonna be a tad later, but I think we're gonna push it a little later, and kind of force people to have more succinct and tight applications. So applications will probably be due either that last week in January, first week in February sort of thing, as opposed to the kind of second Friday in February, or in January. But yeah, so, you know, it's typically 520,000-ish. I think it's gonna be more than probably 540-ish range this year. So, yeah, a little better match, which is nice. And yeah, so that's about it though, but.
Anything else? I just have one thing that I just thought of, Tim, that I would like it if we could set up a site visit to that property on Stern Street.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
That's
You
the
know,
Honey Jewel
yeah.
property.
I don't know exactly where it is, but I'd be very interested in any property that seems to be that close into town.
Did I misread the, it was hard, I was looking at it on my phone. Does it have access to Bedford Road? It looks like
I don't
the
know, it's
property line
108.
goes
It looks
all
like
the way-
Stern
so
Street
it's
is the
probably-
access on both.
108 and 0.
Because they straddle one
Zero
on each
was.
side of Stern Street.
I understand that,
There's
but the one on the right, as you're going from
Stern Street.
Bedford Road up
That's
Stern
First
Street,
Street.
the
We
one
just
on the
had a
right
conversation.
looked like it's extended all the way back to
To
Bedford,
could be.
to Bedford
So,
Road, which would be even more ideal for municipal use.
right, and so, I'm sorry, you were saying something?
Oh, he was.
No,
he
I
just
asked
me
what
a
it was,
question,
because I
yeah.
wasn't here.
Oh.
He didn't know about
Well, it
this.
was an email. It was in one of those Daily Mail.
Oh, okay.
There must be a dwelling on one of them.
There is,
So, yeah.
and a pool and a.
How many acres is it?
It's a
Well,
garden.
one is, there are two,
One is like
two
two,
sides. One
right?
is 2, one is probably 3.5 or something like that, the way it looks, maybe more.
It's,
Well,
as I
it's gotta be more
recall,
than that though, wouldn't it? Because I mean, it was
Yeah,
1.8
it's more than that.
million, right?
well,
300,000, 380,000 square feet, I think. That's the larger of
Right,
the two,
that's about 3 acres.
3 acres.
well, you can do a lot with 3 acres.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's a lot of money though for 5 acres. That was across the road.
well, with a house.
It's the house and the pool, and it's been, as I said, he was a landscape architect, so the property is quite well and completely developed.
Why do we write a first refusal? Was it
Yeah, it's because it's the,
61B, I think.
Agriculture, or timber?
B is, I think that's forestry, right? Yeah.
That must be the other side of Stern Street, not the side where the house is. But it's been a while since I was on the property.
I'd like to, I'd like it if we could do a
Set something up to-
walk.
Yeah.
We
Okay.
should get a
If
walk.
you could do a doodle pool and poll.
Yep.
It'd be nice if it weren't raining.
Should we invite the
Yeah,
CCF
wait for the
folks?
snow.
Yeah, no.
No,
No, just the people who are usually involved in it.
Well, CCF though doesn't have a right of first refusal.
No, I know,
mean,
but
you could have
usually just-
Conscom come.
Yeah, or Conscom.
we have a really big need for municipal.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm not saying that, you know, just because ultimately, if other entities in town have an interest, you know, I mean, do one site visit as opposed to. Because
So,
usually we always let all the parties know, I mean.
Dane, Henry Dane, I know him from Concord a long time ago.
So the Conservation Commission got it, Planning Board got it,
Okay, so Conscom did that.
right, I mean, you can ask them if they wanna do the walkthrough with us.
Yep.
I don't think, I mean, nothing against CCF, I don't think they have any skin in the game.
No, it's just usually, you know,
See-
you let everybody know, because then you do a site visit and everybody's kind of invited.
This is what I was looking at. Bedford Road. Here's the property, isn't it? Backs right up to Bedford Road.
No, I think,
And there's a little bit of stuff from Forbush here. This is Stern Street. This little bit is cut out. And then this is where that guy has his, you know, the guy that's across the street, he has that little barn, and I think he backs up.
mhm.
So, I mean, that would be really ideal
Can you see that? Thanks.
for community center, for instance.
Yeah, I don't get why one side they say the number of acres and the other side they only say the square footage. So how many square feet, I mean, because if this is 2
2
acres.
acres is about 280,000 square feet.
It's, but they're saying this is 2 acres and this,
Assessor's land.
I don't, you know, I mean, that's a lot more than 2 acres.
Yeah, I thought an acre was
But it's-
42,000 square feet.
But it's saying it's 348,000.
42,000
Square feet.
I think so.
300, so what's 350,000?
It'd be like
square feet?
9 acres. It's like
Mm.
9 acres, I think.
Yeah, and so, couple of concerns, you know, I mean, you know, one is, it would be really great if, you know, for us to have some municipal land. And then the other is, why is somebody paying 1.8 million for that?
Depends how much the house is worth.
Or what they can do on 9 acres.
Oh, they can do
Well,
that,
that too.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Yeah, 9 acres, you can build 3 more
And
houses.
it won't be, it won't be
Three more
affordable
$2
housing.
million
I can tell you.
houses.
And I think, you know,
Is this the one with the retention basin? Or the barn?
No.
Or the garage?
No, that,
no,
that's
that
the
would
next
be
door
right
neighbor.
here.
That's there.
That would be right here, right?
That's that little
Oh, that's that
triangle.
little
That's the
thing.
little thing, yeah.
Right, so this is that field that goes right up to Bedford
Yeah.
Road.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
I think that we should consider it personally, as a town purchase for not conservation land, but just keeping it for municipal land in case we need it. It's a pretty, you know, you don't get that much acreage that close into the center of town. And it's
Right on
pretty
the main
flat, it's
drag.
not wetland.
Right.
So anyway, I think that we might wanna consider it.
40 Mead.
I don't want to
Yeah,
make,
no,
wait,
no.
that page has to go back here. I want to try not to use up the document.
So I don't know, does anybody, do you think it's worth a walk?
Walkthrough,
Yeah,
sure.
I absolutely think so.
Okay.
Just be clear, I'm not saying it's affordable housing, I'm not saying it's
No.
conservation land, I'm not saying it's a safety complex, I'm just saying buy it from municipal land,
Yep.
potentially.
Potentially.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Dunkin' Donuts.
Right, no, that's not a
Drive-through.
municipal.
Chief
Right.
Fisher's,
Right.
the police have been asking for one.
Marijuana dispensary.
Yeah,
Then we grow at the bar.
You could grow it on there.
Yeah.
okay.
I think Tim has an update on PEG agreement with Concord.
Oh,
Oh, no, that's true. Carrie and I have been working with Concord on that. I can pass out what we think is very nearly the final version of things. It's gone back and forth a few times. But we think it's, I don't want to speak for Carrie, but we think it represents what our understanding of the services that we'd be purchasing from Concord. I'm forgetting the name of the corporation they set up now.
Merrimack Media
Yeah.
something, Inc. or something.
Right, right.
Okay, so this
But,
is, these are municipals. This is not us in Concord. This is, oh, yeah, it is
It
Concord,
is,
us.
yeah.
okay, Minuteman Media Network?
yeah,
That's it. Yeah.
that's the one.
Municipal.
Yep.
Could you send this electronically to us?
Oh, sure, yep, yep. So,
And I guess we should put this, when do we need to do this by? Should we
Well,
put this on our next agenda?
yeah, I think as soon as we
We
can
should have, you know,
finalize it.
basically started October 1st, so we've been in it for now 2
So
months.
As soon as we can, yeah, come up with an agreement.
But fundamentally, it's pay-as-you-go, buy what you need, pay $50 an hour to Concord, and they'll provide the service.
Okay,
And it's, we can terminate at any time.
okay.
Okay, that's
So-
good.
Yeah, so
Fair.
let's put this on our next agenda, and if you could send it out electronically, that'd be great. Thank you.
Do we have any news about a facility, I mean, how's our facilities job?
We've re-advertised the position, we've gotten some better response to the
Okay, so there's-
revised posting. Originally, we were looking for someone who was both an architect and an engineer, and, you know, we're setting the bar a little bit too
speaking
high
of-
on that, so
We're getting,
I think we've got a few candidates that we can interview in the next week or two. So
Good.
hopefully,
That is nice to hear.
yeah,
We really need this.
we do need,
yeah,
Really need
And Alan, what's an update on the
yeah, the
police
fire
chief?
chief?
We're meeting at 8:30 on Monday to look at the
8:30 AM?
AM.
Yeah.
To look at the responses. They're down to 15.
Mm.
And we've asked them to also not only show us the 15, but to tell us why they rejected 15, what their criteria were.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's 8:30 on Monday?
That's 8:30 on Monday.
Mm-hmm. And then what's the plan moving forward? So you say you have that 15.
Then we'll whittle that down, and then they will come in for a full day of simulations, which is apparently quite a stressful situation, and they'll make the decision from there.
Okay.
We don't, at this point, we don't know anything about
No, anything about
anybody
any
yet.
of that?
No.
Yeah. As of Monday, we will.
Yeah, good, good.
And just one other question, when are we gonna have another executive session to follow up for the last executive session.
Let's put that on the agenda for
We'll
next.
do that on the
we
11th.
got some
Everyone
information
saw
we
the
wanted
information that
last
went
time.
out, yeah,
We've
in
got that
between.
information now.
Okay.
Okay, do that. And the tree lighting is next Tuesday evening at 7 PM this year. It's going to be a little later to give people more of a chance
Yeah,
to,
that's good.
Yeah, get the traffic out of,
right, yeah, get home from work
Yeah.
and bring their kids down.
Clear the rotary a little bit.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, no, we're good.
Good.
I just feel like I gotta rush home.
There's gonna be a heavy meeting next time.
Yeah,
Because
the
we also
11th will
have
be,
the the household waste
Right.
report.
and we
it's-
just added the tax hearing and
Just got 25
master
pages
plan
of
and,
it.
yeah.
Oh,
It's in advance.
Oh.
So, just heads up, guys.
I move adjourn.
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Sorry, I was just trying to put that fire department meeting in my calendar.
Your
When somewhere.
calendar rebelled.
Well, you got the new chair.
Oh, you got it.